The morning sun cast long shadows across the Texas countryside. Colonel Thomas Thunder Walker stood on his porch, coffee mug in hand, surveying the 50 acres he called home now. 6 years into retirement, and still he rose before dawn. Old habits die hard, especially those forged in the desert heat of Iraq and the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan. At 58, Walker's face told stories that his lips rarely did. Deep creases mapped decades of command decisions. His steel gray hair, once regulation short, now touched his collar. But his posture remained unmistakably military, back straight as a flagpole, shoulders squared against the weight of memories. The ranch had become his sanctuary after losing his son Michael in Afghanistan 8 years ago. After that, even 30 years of military service couldn't keep him in uniform. The farm offered simplicity, predictability, no life or death decisions, just the rhythm of seasons and the honest labor of working the land. The phone rang inside. Walker ignored it. Nothing from that world concerned him anymore. But it rang again and again. Persistence was the hallmark of someone who knew him well. Walker stepped inside the modest farmhouse. Military precision still governed his living space. No clutter. Everything with a purpose and a place. Photos of his son in uniform occupied the most prominent spot on the mantel. Beside them, a worn photograph of his old tank crew from Desert Storm. The phone continued its insistent ring. Walker glanced at the caller ID. General Frank Harrison, his oldest friend from West Point, now running the Army's Armor Development Program. They spoke maybe once a year, usually on the anniversary of Michael's death. Walker sighed and picked up. "This better be important, Frank. I was planning to fix my fence today." "Good to hear your voice too, Thunder." Harrison's deep baritone carried the weight of command even through the phone. "How's retirement treating you?" "Cut the small talk, General. What's so urgent you're calling at 6 in the morning?" A pause on the line. "I need you back, Tom." Walker snorted. "I'm too old and too stubborn for whatever you're selling." I hung up my spurs. "Find someone else." "There is no one else. Not for this." Harrison's voice took on the tone Walker recognized from countless mission briefings. "The Stallion tank program is on life support. Congress is 3 months from pulling the plug." The Stallion! Walker's chest tightened. He'd commanded the first generation of those tanks in Desert Storm. His unit had taken out 12 Iraqi tanks without a single American casualty. The most effective armored assault in modern warfare. "That's not my problem anymore, Frank. It's everyone's problem. If we lose the Stallion, the Army loses tank warfare capability altogether. They'll shift everything to drones and automated systems." Walker moved to the window, looking out at his land. "Maybe it's time. Everything changes." "Does it?" "The Russians still believe in tanks. The Chinese too, only we're ready to abandon a century of armored warfare expertise." Harrison paused. "Your expertise, Thunder." "Flattery won't work on me." Walker's tone hardened. "You've got thousands of officers. Find someone else." "I'm not calling because you're the best tanker I know, though you are. I'm calling because Jimmy Rodriguez is heading the technical team." Walker froze. "Captain Rodriguez?" "Major now. Engineering Corps. Smart kid. Maybe too smart for his own good." James Rodriguez, son of Manuel Rodriguez, Walker's closest friend and tank gunner during Desert Storm. Manuel had died saving Walker's life during the Second Battle of Fallujah. His dying request: look after his boy. A request Walker had honored until his own son died. After that, the pain of mentoring anyone became unbearable. He'd cut ties with Jimmy, unable to face the young man without seeing both his father and his own lost son. "Jimmy doesn't need me hovering over him. He's made his own way." "He's brilliant but inexperienced," Harrison countered. "Got all these ideas about digital interfaces and AI targeting systems. But he doesn't understand what happens when the power goes out and you're facing enemy fire with nothing but your training and instincts." Walker remained silent, memories flooding back. The heat, the noise, the bone-jarring impact when your tank took a hit but the armor held. "The program needs someone who's been there," Harrison continued. "Someone who understands that tanks aren't just machines, they're extensions of the men inside them." Walker moved to the mantel, touching the frame holding the photo of his old crew. Manuel Rodriguez grinning beside him, arms slung over Walker's shoulder. They looked invincible then. "I can't, Frank. I'm done with that world." Harrison's voice softened. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. This is bigger than just another weapon system. This is about preserving a legacy. Your legacy." Walker closed his eyes. "When do you need an answer?" "There's one more thing you should know," Harrison said, his voice grave. "If this project fails, It's the end of American tank warfare altogether. Walker's eyes snapped open. What are you talking about? Senator Davis chairs the Armed Services Committee now. He's pushing for complete automation of ground forces. Drones, robots, AI systems. No human operators in harm's way. Sounds good on paper and to taxpayers. But it's suicide on the battlefield, Walker finished. Exactly. Once we lose this knowledge, this expertise, we can't get it back. Not quickly, not when we need it most. Walker stared at his reflection in the window glass, an old soldier looking back at him, still standing, still breathing, when so many others weren't. The clock's ticking, Thunder. I need you in Fort Hood by Monday. I'll send a car. Walker hadn't agreed. Yet Harrison was already making arrangements, just like the old days when they were cadets together. Harrison always assuming Walker would follow him into battle. Usually he was right. I haven't said yes. You haven't said no either, Harrison countered. Think about Manuel. Think about what he'd want you to do. The line went dead. Walker replaced the receiver and turned back to the window. The sun had fully risen now, burning away the morning mist. His fence would need to wait. He walked to his bedroom and opened the closet. Behind his civilian clothes hung his dress uniform, preserved in plastic. Walker hadn't worn it since his son's funeral. He unzipped the cover and ran his fingers over the ribbons and medals. Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, campaign ribbons from conflicts most Americans had already forgotten. Below the uniform, a locked footlocker held personal items from his service years. Walker knelt, his knees protesting, and dialed the combination. Inside lay the treasures of a warrior. His sidearm, unit patches, challenge coins, and a worn leather journal. Under these lay a sealed envelope, Manuel's handwriting on the front. For Jimmy, when he becomes a man. Walker had never delivered it. After Michael's death, he couldn't bear to face any reminders of what he'd lost. He'd failed Manuel's final request. Maybe this was his chance to make amends. Walker resealed the footlocker and stood. He'd give Harrison until morning to decide. But in his heart, he already knew the answer. Some calls you can't refuse, no matter how much you might want to. Chapter 2. Facing the Past. The military vehicle rolled through the gates of Fort Hood 3 days later. Walker sat rigid in the back seat, dress uniform replaced by simple khakis and a button-down shirt. He'd refused to dig out any of his old Army gear. If Harrison wanted him as a civilian consultant, he'd dress like one. The sprawling base hadn't changed much. Same utilitarian buildings, same precise rows of barracks, same young soldiers moving with purpose across the grounds. Only now, they looked impossibly young to Walker's eyes. Had he ever been that young? Colonel Walker, sir, it's an honor. The driver, a young corporal, kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror. My father served in Desert Storm, too. Walker nodded but offered no conversation. He was already regretting this decision. The vehicle pulled up to the Armored Warfare Development Center, a newer complex on the eastern edge of the base. Modern architecture, lots of glass and steel, nothing like the utilitarian structures Walker remembered. A familiar figure waited at the entrance. General Frank Harrison stood ramrod straight in his service uniform, 4 stars gleaming on each shoulder. At 60, Harrison remained fit and imposing, though his hair had gone completely white. You look like hell, Thunder. Harrison grinned as Walker exited the vehicle. And you look like a recruiting poster, Frank. Some things never change. The old friends clasped hands. For a moment, decades fell away, and they were young officers again, full of ambition and certainty. Thanks for coming, Harrison said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I. Walker glanced at the gleaming building. Quite the palace you've built yourself. Wait until you see inside. We've got technology that would have seemed like science fiction when we were driving tanks. They passed through security, Harrison nodding to the guards who snapped to attention. The interior buzzed with activity. Civilian engineers in lab coats worked alongside uniformed personnel. Massive screens displayed technical schematics and simulation data. Welcome to the future of armored warfare, Harrison announced. Or what's left of it if we fail. Walker remained stone-faced. Where's the hardware? I didn't come here to look at computer screens. Harrison's smile tightened. Always direct. Follow me. They descended to a lower level. The elevator doors opened to reveal a massive hangar space. Here was the heart of the operation. Several Stallion tanks in various states of disassembly filled the space. Engineers swarmed over them like ants, removing panels, testing components, installing equipment. Walker paused. The stallion had evolved since his day. The silhouette remained similar, but the turret design had changed, the main gun longer, the hull modified for better mine resistance. Still, he'd know this beast anywhere. The XP-1 prototype, Harrison explained, pointing to the nearest tank. Supposed to be the answer to Russia's latest model and China's new main battle tank. Walker approached slowly, running his hand along the armored hull. The touch of cold steel brought back a flood of memories. The confined space of the commander's station, the smell of gun oil and sweat, the vibration through his bones when the main gun fired. What's the problem? Looks impressive enough. Harrison's expression darkened. Looks can be deceiving. The targeting system crashes under desert conditions. The autoloader jams. The thermal imaging goes haywire. $300 million spent. And we've got a showpiece that would get its crew killed in actual combat. Walker circled the tank, examining it with a critical eye. And you're 3 months from cancellation? Less. Senator Davis is pushing hard. He's chairing a special committee meeting in 10 weeks. If we don't have a working prototype by then, the whole program gets scrapped. Walker nodded slowly. And Jimmy Rodriguez, where does he fit in? Major Rodriguez heads our engineering team. Brilliant mind, MIT graduate. Wrote his thesis on next-generation battle management systems. But never served in a tank unit, Walker finished. Harrison shrugged. Not everyone can. The Army needed his brain more than his trigger finger. A tank isn't a theoretical problem, Frank. It's a practical one. Under fire, covered in dust, with men's lives at stake, theory means nothing. That's why you're here. Harrison clapped him on the shoulder to bring some real-world perspective to these theoreticians. A new voice interrupted them. With all due respect, General, we have plenty of real-world perspective. Walker turned to find a man in his early 30s approaching. Tall and lean, with his father's dark eyes and determined jaw. James Rodriguez had grown from the gangly teenager Walker remembered into a confident officer. His uniform bore the insignia of the Corps of Engineers and a major's gold oak leaf. Colonel Walker, Rodriguez saluted crisply. It's been a long time, sir. Walker returned the salute automatically, muscle memory overriding his civilian status. Major, you've done well for yourself. An awkward silence stretched between them. 8 years since they'd last spoken. Since Walker had cut all ties after Michael's death. I was surprised to hear you join the project, Rodriguez said finally. That makes 2 of us. Harrison cleared his throat. Major Rodriguez has been instrumental in redesigning the Stallion's fire control systems. We're attempting to integrate advanced AI with traditional controls. Attempting? Walker raised an eyebrow. Rodriguez's expression tightened. We've encountered some integration issues. Nothing insurmountable. Major Rodriguez believes the future is full digitization, Harrison explained. A tank that can acquire and engage targets with minimal human input. Walker snorted. Sounds like you're trying to build a video game, not a tank. Rodriguez's jaw clenched, but his voice remained professional. The battlefield has changed, Colonel. Our enemies use drones, cyber warfare, and electronic countermeasures. We can't fight tomorrow's wars with yesterday's thinking. The battlefield always changes, Walker countered, but certain principles remain constant. A tank crew needs to function when systems fail. When the screens go black, when it's just 4 men in a metal box facing the enemy. Perhaps you'd like to see our current progress, Rodriguez suggested, his tone cooling. We're running a simulation this afternoon. Before Walker could respond, a new figure approached from across the hangar. A woman in her mid-50s, her dark hair streaked with silver, lab coat worn over civilian clothes. She moved with confidence through the technical teams, occasionally stopping to check a readout or offer direction. Walker's heart skipped. He'd know that walk anywhere, even after all these years. Eleanor Morgan, the one who got away, the woman who'd chosen Walker's best friend over him all those years ago. The widow of Lieutenant Colonel William Morgan, killed in action in Iraq in 2007. Dar Morgan is our lead on armor systems, Harrison explained, watching Walker carefully. She's pioneered a new composite that might give us the edge we need. Eleanor looked up, her eyes finding Walker's across the space. Her steps faltered momentarily before she regained composure and approached. Colonel Walker, this is unexpected. Her voice was exactly as he remembered. Precise, intelligent. With that slight southern accent she'd never quite eliminated. Dr. Morgan, Walker nodded stiffly. I wasn't aware you were part of this project. I've been with the Armor Development Program for 12 years now. Her eyes studied his face. You look well. A lie, but a polite one. Walker knew he looked like what he was, an old soldier put out to pasture. Too many missions, too many losses. Frank didn't mention you were involved. Harrison had the decency to look uncomfortable. Must have slipped my mind. Eleanor's lips curved slightly. Frank never could lie convincingly, even at West Point. The tension in the air was palpable. Rodriguez looked between them, confusion evident on his face. Dr. Morgan developed the composite armor that saved countless lives in Iraq and Afghanistan, Harrison explained to Walker. Her latest innovation might be the key to making the stallion viable again. If we can overcome the integration challenges, Eleanor added, glancing at Rodriguez, the new armor affects the tank's electronic signature in ways we didn't anticipate. Meaning? Walker asked. Meaning the targeting systems get confused about where the tank ends and the environment begins, Rodriguez explained. We're working on it. Walker took this in. So you've got armor that works but blinds the tank, and targeting that's precise but crashes under combat conditions. That's oversimplifying, Rodriguez protested. Is it? Walker turned to Harrison. This is what $300 million buys these days? We're worse off than I thought. Eleanor's eyes flashed. Perhaps before passing judgment, Colonel, you might want to actually understand what we're trying to achieve. The familiar fire in her eyes brought back memories, their passionate debates as young officers. Her brilliant much challenging his tactical experience, the respect that had grown into something more until duty and loyalty had forced them apart. I understand perfectly, Walker replied. You're trying to reinvent the wheel instead of fixing the car. Harrison stepped between them. Let's continue this discussion in the briefing room. Major Rodriguez can present the current status, and then we can discuss next steps. Walker followed, acutely aware of Eleanor walking beside Rodriguez, already deep in technical conversation. 8 years of solitude on his ranch hadn't prepared him for this. Not just returning to the Army world, but facing the people who connected to his past, to his failures. The briefing room featured a large conference table and state-of-the-art presentation screens. Other team members filed in, a mix of military personnel and civilian engineers. Walker took a seat far from Eleanor, focusing instead on Harrison. Before we begin, Harrison announced, I want to clarify Colonel Walker's role here. He's joining us as Senior Tactical Advisor with full authority on combat readiness assessments. His experience with the original Stallion platform is invaluable. Rodriguez stepped to the front of the room. With all due respect, General, we've had multiple combat veterans consult on this project. Our issues are primarily technical, not tactical. And yet, Walker interjected, your technical marvel can't operate in desert conditions where most tank battles occur. Seems like a tactical consideration to me. Rodriguez's expression remained professional, but his eyes hardened. If you'll allow me to present our current status, Colonel. The presentation was thorough and technically impressive. Rodriguez commanded the room with confidence, explaining complex engineering challenges and proposed solutions. Walker had to admit the young man knew his subject, but knowledge wasn't the issue. So in summary, Rodriguez concluded, we've overcome 70% of our integration challenges. The main obstacles remain the targeting system's thermal sensitivity and the autoloader's reliability in dusty conditions. And the power management issues, Eleanor added, the new systems draw more power than the original engine was designed to provide. Which means, Walker asked? Which means we either need a new power plant or we need to make the systems more efficient, she explained. We're pursuing both paths. Walker leaned forward. Let me get this straight. You've spent $300 million to create a tank that overheats, can't reliably load its main gun, and might run out of power in the middle of a firefight? Rodriguez stiffened. With respect, Colonel, developing next-generation weapon systems isn't like maintaining existing ones. We're pushing boundaries. The boundary that matters is between alive and dead, Walker shot back. A tank that fails in combat gets its crew killed. Period. Harrison raised a hand. This is exactly why you're here, Thunder. We need this perspective. Walker stood, approaching the displayed schematic of the XP-1. What percentage of the original Stallion design remains intact? Rodriguez hesitated. Approximately 40%. We've replaced most of the electronics, modified the turret, upgraded the main gun, and redesigned the crew stations. So you've created an entirely new tank with old bones and you're surprised when the skeleton can't support the new muscle? Walker shook his head. Classic Pentagon thinking, trying to make something completely new while pretending it's just an upgrade to avoid procurement regulations. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Walker had hit too close to home. Harrison cleared his throat. Colonel Walker raises a valid point. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. With all due respect, Rodriguez countered, we don't have time to start from scratch. The committee hearing is in 10 weeks. Either we make this work or American tank development ends with this project. Eleanor stood, drawing everyone's attention. What if we take a hybrid approach? Keep the digital systems, but ensure mechanical backups for critical functions? Redundancy increases weight, Rodriguez objected. We're already at the limit of what the suspension can handle. Walker studied the schematic more closely. What if we stripped it down? Remove the non-essentials. Focus on making a tank that works in combat conditions first, then add the bells and whistles if there's room. Define non-essential, Rodriguez challenged. Anything that doesn't directly contribute to the tank's primary functions. Move, shoot, communicate, survive. Walker turned to face the room. A tank isn't a tech showcase. It's a weapon, and weapons need to work when everything goes to hell. The tension in the room was palpable. Walker had effectively challenged the entire direction of the project, but no one immediately contradicted him. Harrison nodded slowly. It's worth considering. Major Rodriguez, work with Colonel Walker to identify potential simplifications. Dr. Morgan, continue your armor integration work. Let's reconvene tomorrow to discuss a revised approach. As the meeting broke up, Walker found himself alone with Rodriguez. The young officer's expression was unreadable. Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished, Walker offered, attempting to bridge the 8-year gap between them. Rodriguez's face hardened. You wouldn't know. You haven't been around. The words landed like a physical blow. Walker had no defense. Jimmy, after Michael died, I understand grief, Colonel, but my father asked you to be there for me. You made a promise to him. Rodriguez gathered his materials, and then you disappeared when I needed guidance most. Before Walker could respond, Rodriguez continued. I respected you my entire life, wanted to make you proud almost as much as my own father. But you walked away, so forgive me if I'm not eager for your approval now. Walker stood silent as Rodriguez left the room. The young man was right. Walker had failed him, had failed Manuel's dying wish, added to the list of regrets that kept him awake at night. Harrison re-entered, catching the end of the exchange. Give him time, Thunder. He's got his father's pride. And his father's right to be angry with me. Walker sighed. This was a mistake, Frank. I'm not what this project needs. You're exactly what this project needs. Someone who'll speak truth to power. Someone who understands what's at stake. Harrison approached, lowering his voice. There's something I didn't mention in the briefing. Walker waited. Senator Davis isn't just pushing for automation because he believes in the technology. His biggest campaign donor is Centaur Defense Systems. They're developing autonomous combat vehicles that would replace tanks entirely. Politics, Walker spat the word like a curse, always comes down to money. Always has, but this is bigger than politics. If we lose this capability, we can't get it back quickly. And the next war won't wait for us to relearn what we've forgotten. Harrison put a hand on Walker's shoulder. I need you, Tom. The Army needs you, even if they don't know it yet. Walker stared at the schematic still displayed on the screen. The Stallion had been his home for years, had kept him and his men alive through the worst fighting in Desert Storm. There was something almost sacred about that bond between man and machine. I'll stay, he said finally. But we do this my way. No shortcuts, no compromises on combat readiness. That's all I ask. Harrison smiled. Your quarters are arranged. Building 1370, officers' guest housing. Walker nodded, gathering his things. As he turned to leave, Harrison added, one more thing you should know. Something in his tone made Walker pause. We spent 80% of our budget already. If this next phase fails, there's nothing left for another attempt. Walker absorbed this. Then we better not fail. Walking through the complex toward the exit, Walker passed the main hangar again. Through the windows, he could see Eleanor Morgan working alongside a technician, examining a section of armor plating. She looked up, somehow sensing his presence, their eyes meeting briefly across the distance. Another road not taken, another regret to carry. Outside, the Texas sun beat down mercilessly. Walker stood momentarily disoriented, a civilian on a military base, a man out of time. The young soldiers passing by seemed to belong to a different world now. Digital natives, raised on video games and smartphones. Could they understand what it meant to command 30 tons of steel in combat? To feel the concussion when the main gun fired. To know your life depended not on code, but on training and the bond between crew members? Walker doubted it, but maybe that was the point of his being here, to translate between worlds, to ensure what mattered most wasn't lost in the rush toward the future. A military vehicle approached, stopping beside him, the same young corporal from earlier. Need a ride to your quarters, Colonel? Walker nodded, climbing in. As they drove through the base, he found himself studying the young soldier. Corporal, have you ever served in an armored unit? No, sir, Signal Corps, but my father was a tank driver in Desert Storm. Which unit? 1st Armored Division, sir. He was at 73 Easting. Walker nodded. The famous battle where American tanks had destroyed an entire Iraqi armored division in less than half an hour. A perfect demonstration of what well-trained crews and superior machines could accomplish. He made it home. Yes, sir. Talks about it all the time. Says nothing in life has ever compared to being part of a tank crew. Walker understood completely. There was something about it that civilians could never comprehend. The closeness, the trust. 4 men in a steel box, each completely dependent on the others doing their jobs perfectly. Your father's right. There's nothing like it. They arrived at the guest housing. Walker thanked the corporal and entered the modest apartment. Standard military issue, functional, impersonal. On the desk lay a folder marked Confidential. Walker opened it to find the complete technical specifications for the Stallion XP1, along with performance reports from the test phases. He settled in to read, old habits returning easily, making notes, identifying weaknesses, thinking through solutions. Hours passed. The sun set. Walker worked on, fueled by black coffee and the growing certainty that the project had lost its way. Too many engineers, not enough soldiers. Too much theory, not enough practice. A knock at his door interrupted his concentration. Walker opened it to find Rodriguez standing there, still in uniform despite the late hour. Major, what can I do for you? Rodriguez held up a flash drive. The simulation data you requested. I thought you might want to review it before tomorrow's meeting. Walker stepped, allowing him to enter. Thank you, that's thorough of you. Rodriguez placed the drive on the desk. Just doing my job, sir. As the young officer turned to leave, Walker spoke. Your father would handle this differently, you know. Rodriguez stopped. Sir? Manuel would laugh at these specifications. Say they were designed by someone who'd never had to repair a track under fire. A ghost of a smile touched Rodriguez's face. He did have strong opinions about engineers. The strongest. Walker hesitated. I owe you an apology, Jimmy. After Michael died, I shut everything down. Everyone out, including you. It wasn't right. Rodriguez stood silent for a long moment. I came to the funeral, wanted to tell you I understood, that I'd been through it too, losing my father, but your eyes, they were empty, like no one was home. No one was, Walker admitted, not for a long time. Another silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken grief. I have something for you, Walker said finally, something I should have given you years ago. He crossed to his bag, retrieving the sealed envelope he'd brought from the ranch. Your father asked me to give you this when you became a man. I think a major's rank qualifies. Rodriguez took the envelope, staring at his father's handwriting. He wrote this before his last deployment? Walker nodded. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure you got it when the time was right. He looked away. I failed at that, like I failed at a lot of things. Rodriguez tucked the envelope carefully into his uniform pocket. Thank you for bringing it now. Will you read it? Not yet. I need to be ready. Rodriguez straightened. About the project, sir. I know we have different approaches, but my father always said you were the best tank commander he had ever served under. If you have suggestions, I'm willing to listen. It was an olive branch. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but an opening. Let's start with the autoloader, Walker suggested. In my experience, mechanical simplicity trumps electronic efficiency every time in combat conditions. Rodriguez nodded. I'll have the team review the original Stallion design tomorrow. See what we can salvage. Good, and Jimmy, the door's open if you want to talk about the project or anything else. Rodriguez paused at the threshold. One step at a time, Colonel, but his tone had softened slightly. See you at 0700. After the door closed, Walker returned to his work with renewed purpose. Outside, the night settled over Fort Hood. In barracks across the base, a new generation of soldiers prepared to defend a nation that increasingly relied on technology they barely understood. Walker would make sure they had what they needed when the moment of truth arrived. Not just advanced weapons, but ones they could count on when everything else failed. It was what he owed to the past, to Manuel, to Michael, and to the future that Jimmy Rodriguez and his generation would have to face, ready or not. Chapter 3, The Last Team. Dawn broke over Fort Hood as Walker made his way to the motor pool. He'd slept little, his mind racing with ideas after reviewing the technical data. The Stallion XP1 was a mess of compromises and half measures, each brilliant in isolation, but conflicting in combination. The massive hangar doors stood open. Inside, technicians prepared for the day's testing. Walker passed them with minimal acknowledgement, his focus on the tank at the center of the space. In the early morning light, stripped of its external components, the Stallion looked vulnerable, exposed. Early riser, I see. Eleanor Morgan approached, lab coat already on, coffee in hand. Some habits never change. Walker nodded. I wanted to see her without the circus around. Her? Eleanor smiled. Still personifying machines, Thomas? A tank isn't just a machine. Ask anyone who served in one. Walker ran his hand along the hull. She's home. Protector, weapon, all in one. Eleanor studied him over her coffee. You haven't changed as much as you want people to think. Walker said nothing, continuing his inspection. The silence between them was complicated. Not uncomfortable exactly, but laden with history. I was sorry to hear about Michael, she said finally. I sent a letter. I got it. Never replied. I didn't reply to anyone. I understand. And she would. Eleanor had lost her husband in Iraq. Knew the paralyzing grief that followed. How's your daughter? Walker asked. Samantha's good. Finishing medical school next year. Eleanor smiled. She has William's determination. Another silence. Too many years. Too many paths diverged. The armor integration issues, Walker said, changing the subject. What's the core problem? Eleanor accepted the shift to professional ground. The new composite creates an electromagnetic signature that interferes with the targeting systems. We can shield the electronics, but that adds weight and complexity. And without the new armor, the Stallion would be vulnerable to next-generation anti-tank weapons. She shook her head. It's not optional, Thomas. Not if you want the crew to survive. Walker nodded slowly. Then we adapt, simplify the electronics, make them robust enough to function despite the interference. Major Rodriguez won't like that. He's invested heavily in the digital systems. Major Rodriguez needs to decide what matters more, his vision or a tank that works. Walker turned to face her. The fundamental question hasn't changed in 100 years of tank warfare. Can it move, shoot, and survive under the worst conditions imaginable? Eleanor's expression softened. You still see it so clearly. Black and white, mission-focused. Someone has to, especially when billions of dollars and young lives are at stake. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Rodriguez, accompanied by a team of engineers and technicians. The major looked like he hadn't slept either, but his uniform remained crisp. Colonel, Dr. Morgan. Rodriguez nodded to them both. We're ready to begin the systems test whenever you are. Walker straightened. Before we start, I want to make some changes to the test parameters. Rodriguez frowned. The protocol was established weeks ago, sir, and it's testing the wrong things. Walker turned to address the assembled team. A controlled environment that tells us nothing about combat readiness. We need to stress this system to failure. With respect, Colonel, we need baseline performance data first, one of the civilian engineers objected. You have 6 failed tests worth of baseline data, Walker countered. Time to try something different. He turned to Rodriguez. Unless you object, Major? A challenge. Rodriguez recognized it immediately. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. What do you propose, Colonel? First, disable the climate control in the crew compartment. Then reduce visibility by 80% with smoke generators. Finally, introduce random power fluctuations to simulate battle damage. The engineering team exchanged concerned glances. That's not a test, the civilian engineer protested. That's sabotage. That's war, Walker corrected. And if this tank can't handle it, it has no business on the battlefield. Rodriguez considered this, then nodded slowly. Make the preparations. We test under Colonel Walker's parameters in 1 hour. As the team dispersed to implement the changes, Rodriguez approached Walker. You're setting us up to fail. I'm setting you up to learn, Walker corrected. Better to fail here than in combat. And if Senator Davis hears we failed another test, he won't, because this isn't an official test. This is a learning exercise. Walker held Rodriguez's gaze. Sometimes you have to break something to understand how to fix it properly. An hour later, the Stallion XP1 was prepared according to Walker's specifications. Smoke generators positioned around the test area. Power system modified to introduce random fluctuations. Climate control disabled. Walker, Rodriguez, Eleanor, and Harrison observed from the control room overlooking the test area. The tank crew, 4 young soldiers selected for their technical aptitude rather than combat experience, looked nervous as they climbed aboard. "Begin the test," Rodriguez ordered. The stallion's engine roared to life, the distinctive turbine whine filling the hangar. The tank moved forward into the test area, its movement smooth and precise. "Initiate smoke," Walker commanded. Dense smoke billowed around the tank, reducing visibility to near zero. Inside the crew compartment, the temperature began to rise rapidly without climate control. "Target acquisition test," Rodriguez directed through the communication system. The turret rotated, searching for targets through the smoke. Electronic sensors struggled to compensate for the limited visibility. "Initiate power fluctuations," Walker ordered. The lights in the hangar dimmed momentarily as the tank's systems were subjected to random power drops. On the monitors, they could see the crew's growing frustration as systems failed and rebooted unpredictably. "Target acquisition failing," reported the gunner. "System keeps resetting." "Switch to manual backup," the tank commander ordered. There was a pause. "Sir, there is no manual backup." Walker exchanged glances with Rodriguez. The young officer's expression remained neutral, but his eyes revealed his concern. "Navigation system offline," reported the driver. "Attempting restart." On the thermal cameras, they could see the crew sweating profusely in the rising heat. The tank had stopped moving, turret frozen mid-rotation. "Temperature approaching critical for the electronics," noted a technician in the control room. "Continue the test," Walker instructed. For 10 more minutes, they watched as the crew struggled with failing systems. Finally, the tank commander's voice came through, strained and frustrated. "Control, we're dead in the water. Multiple systems failure. Request termination of the test." Walker nodded. "End test. Extract the crew." As the smoke cleared and the crew emerged, visibly exhausted and overheated, Walker turned to Rodriguez. "That's what happens when theory meets reality." Rodriguez's expression was tight but thoughtful. "Point taken, Colonel. The system isn't combat ready." "Not even close." Walker looked at Harrison. "We need to rethink our approach completely." Harrison nodded grimly. "I suspected as much. That's why you're here." He turned to the room. "Everyone except Colonel Walker, Major Rodriguez, and Dr. Morgan is dismissed. We need to have a frank discussion." After the room cleared, Harrison faced the small group. "That was a disaster, but an instructive one. Thoughts?" "We've over-engineered," Walker stated flatly. "Created a tank that requires perfect conditions to function. That's unacceptable. The integration challenges are greater than anticipated," Rodriguez acknowledged reluctantly. "But the core technologies are sound." "Sound in isolation, perhaps," Eleanor noted, "but not as a cohesive system." Harrison paced the small room. "We have 10 weeks and 20% of our budget remaining. Senator Davis will be looking for any excuse to cancel the program. So what's our play?" Walker moved to the schematic display. "We strip it down, start with what works, and build back up. The original Stallion platform was solid. We modernize selectively, not comprehensively." "That means abandoning much of the work we've done," Rodriguez objected. "Better to deliver 80% of what works than 100% of what doesn't," Walker countered. Harrison looked between them. "Major, you've led this project from the beginning. Colonel Walker has the combat experience we need. I need you two to find common ground." Rodriguez straightened. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Always." "I believe we can salvage the advanced systems while addressing Colonel Walker's concerns, but not with the current team composition." Rodriguez hesitated. "We need experienced tank personnel involved in the redesign, not just as consultants, but as integral team members." Walker raised an eyebrow, surprised by the suggestion. "What are you proposing specifically?" Harrison asked. "A hybrid team, engineers paired directly with veteran tank crew members, working side by side to ensure both technical innovation and combat practicality." Walker nodded slowly, impressed despite himself. "The Major's right. We need tankers in the room when decisions are made, not just giving input after the fact." Harrison considered this. "Finding qualified personnel on short notice won't be easy." "I know where to look," Walker said, "if you'll authorize temporary duty assignments." "You have someone in mind?" Walker nodded. "My old crew from Desert Storm, the ones still alive anyway. Men who know what matters when the shooting starts." "Most of them must be retired by now," Harrison noted. "All of them are, but they know the Stallion platform better than anyone alive." Walker turned to Rodriguez. "And they served with your father. They'll want to help for his sake, if nothing else." Something shifted in Rodriguez's expression. A softening. My father always said his tank crew was the best family he ever had, besides my mother and me, of course. Harrison nodded decisively. Make the calls, Thunder. Get whoever you can. I'll handle the paperwork. As Harrison and Rodriguez left to begin arrangements, Eleanor remained behind. The old gang back together, she mused. William spoke of them often. Walker nodded. Her husband had served in the same battalion, though not in Walker's company. They're good men, the kind you want beside you when things go sideways. And you think they can save this project? Walker considered this. I think they understand what matters in tank design. The rest? We'll see. Eleanor studied him. There's something you're not saying, always perceptive. It had been one of the things that attracted him to her decades ago. Frank didn't tell me how bad things were. This project isn't just troubled, it's on life support. And you think bringing in retired tankers will change that? I think getting back to basics might. Walker shook his head. But honestly, I'm not sure anything will save it now, not with the time and budget constraints. Eleanor's expression softened. Then why try? Why not walk away? Go back to your ranch and your solitude. A question Walker had asked himself repeatedly since arriving. Because Jimmy deserves better than watching his project die. Because Manuel would have expected me to help his son. And because, he paused. Because once a tanker, always a tanker, Eleanor finished for him, smiling slightly. Some loyalties never die. Walker didn't confirm or deny, but they both knew she was right. 3 days later, the old crew began arriving. First came Master Sergeant Carlos Vasquez, retired, Walker's former gunner. At 57, Vasquez remained barrel-chested and imposing, though his black hair had gone salt and pepper. After retiring from the Army, he'd opened a successful auto repair shop in San Antonio. Next was Chief Warrant Officer Jeffrey Doc Thompson, retired, who had served as Walker's driver. Lean and serious at 55, Thompson had gone on to become an emergency room physician after leaving the service. His steady hands and cool under pressure serving him well in his second career. The last to arrive was Sergeant First Class Darnell Wilson, retired, who had been Walker's loader. At 56, Wilson had maintained his powerful physique, now working as a high school football coach and history teacher in Georgia. Walker greeted each of them personally at the base entrance, awkward handshakes giving way to bear hugs as old bonds reasserted themselves. None of them had seen each other in years, yet the connection remained. Never thought I'd see the inside of a tank again, Vasquez commented as Walker drove them to the development center. My wife thinks I'm having a midlife crisis coming back here. You're too old for midlife, Thompson quipped from the back seat. This is more like three-quarter life crisis. Speak for yourself, Doc, Wilson retorted. Some of us stayed in shape after retiring. The familiar banter continued as Walker briefed them on the situation. Their expressions grew serious as they understood the stakes. So this kid Rodriguez, Vasquez said carefully. He's Manny's boy? Walker nodded. All grown up, major now, engineering corps. Damn, Vasquez shook his head. Seems like yesterday he was this skinny teenager asking questions about his dad's tank. He's smart, Walker acknowledged, but he's never served in a tank unit, doesn't understand what matters when the shells start flying. That's why we're here, Wilson stated simply. For Manny, and for the kids who will have to fight the next war. They arrived at the development center to find Rodriguez waiting, his expression a mix of emotion as he recognized his father's old crew members. The reunion was touching, each man embracing the young officer, commenting on his resemblance to Manuel, sharing brief memories. Your father saved all our lives more than once, Vasquez told him. Best damn gunner I ever saw. Could thread a sabot round through a keyhole at 2,000 meters. Rodriguez nodded, visibly moved. He told me stories about all of you. The time Sergeant Wilson loaded 5 rounds in under 20 seconds during an ambush. How Dr. Thompson drove through a minefield backward when the forward sensors failed. Your old man had a gift for storytelling, Thompson said with a gentle smile. Embellished a bit. Only a bit, Walker corrected. Harrison joined them, welcoming the veterans officially. Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for coming on such short notice. We're facing a critical situation. The colonel filled us in, Wilson replied. Just point us at the problem. They were escorted to the main hangar where the Stallion XP-1 awaited. The veterans circled it slowly, professional eyes assessing every detail. Too pretty, Vasquez declared finally. A tank shouldn't look this clean. Means it's never been tested properly. Crew stations seem cramped, Thompson noted, peering inside the hatch. All these screens take up space the crew needs. Wilson rapped his knuckles against the hull. Armor seems solid, at least. What's the composition, sir? That's classified, Harrison began. Multi-layer composite with reactive elements and space panels, Eleanor interrupted, approaching the group. Similar to what saved your lives in Desert Storm, but significantly advanced. Walker made introductions. The veterans greeted Eleanor with the respect her reputation commanded. Dr. Morgan's husband served in our battalion, Walker explained, and she's developed most of the armor technologies that kept our forces alive in Iraq and Afghanistan. Then we owe you a debt, ma'am, Vasquez said sincerely. Eleanor smiled. Just doing my job, like you gentlemen. Rodriguez stepped forward. Now that we're all here, I suggest we divide into teams, each veteran paired with engineers focusing on their specialty area. Sergeant Vasquez with the weapons team, Dr. Thompson with propulsion and mobility, Sergeant Wilson with autoloader and ammunition handling. And the colonel? Vasquez asked. Colonel Walker will work with me on overall systems integration and command interfaces, Rodriguez answered. We need to ensure everything works together as a cohesive weapon system. Walker nodded approval. Good plan, but first I want all of us to sit down together. No engineers yet, just tankers talking to tankers. Harrison understood. Take the conference room. Let me know when you're ready for the full team. The small group relocated to the privacy of the conference room. Once alone, Walker addressed them directly. Before we dive in, you need to understand what's really at stake. This isn't just another weapons program. He looked each man in the eye. If the Stallion project fails, the Army will likely abandon tanks altogether in favor of unmanned systems. A heavy silence fell over the room. They can't be serious, Vasquez finally said. Drones can't hold ground. It's about politics and money as much as military strategy, Walker explained. Senator Davis chairs the Armed Services Committee. His biggest donor is Centaur Defense Systems, which specializes in autonomous weapons. Rodriguez nodded confirmation. The senator has made it clear he sees crude tanks as obsolete, too expensive, too vulnerable, too many human lives at risk. That's horseshit, Wilson stated flatly. No AI can make the judgment calls a good tank commander makes in combat. We know that, Walker agreed, but we have to prove it. And to do that, we need to create a tank that combines the best of human operation with selective technological advantage. A tank that works even when the technology fails, Thompson added, understanding. Exactly. Walker turned to Rodriguez. Your father understood this better than anyone. The technology serves the crew, not the other way around. Rodriguez was silent for a moment. He used to say that the difference between a good tank and a great one was whether you could still fight after taking a hit. Nods of agreement around the table. That's what we've lost sight of, Walker continued. The Stallion XP-1 is brilliant when everything works perfectly, but nothing works perfectly in combat. We need to create a tank that degrades gracefully under stress. That gives its crew options when systems fail. Like manual backups for the electronic systems, Thompson suggested. Mechanical overrides for the autoloader, Wilson added. Optical sights alongside the digital ones, Vasquez contributed. Rodriguez looked thoughtful. That means redesigning major systems with limited time and budget. Then we focus on what matters most, Walker said. The four fundamentals: move, shoot, communicate, survive. Everything else is secondary. The discussion continued for hours. Each veteran contributed insights from their combat experience. Rodriguez listened more than he spoke, absorbing decades of practical knowledge that no engineering program could provide. By evening, they had outlined a new approach. Not as technologically ambitious as the original XP-1 design, but far more practical for actual combat conditions. A hybrid that respected both innovation and proven reliability. When they finally emerged from the conference room, Harrison was waiting with Eleanor and the lead engineers. We have a plan, Walker announced. Major Rodriguez will present it tomorrow morning, but I'll tell you now, it's going to require rethinking much of what's been done so far. Harrison nodded. At this point, I'm open to anything that delivers a functioning tank in 10 weeks. As the group dispersed for the evening, Rodriguez approached Walker privately. Colonel, I need to speak with you. They found a quiet corner of the nearly empty facility. I read my father's letter, Rodriguez said without preamble. Walker's heart tightened. I see. He wrote it the night before the mission where he died. Somehow he knew. Rodriguez's voice remained steady, but emotion lay just beneath the surface. He said you were the finest officer he'd ever served under. That if anything happened to him, he trusted you to show me what it means to be a man of honor. Walker remained silent, the weight of his failure heavy between them. He also said something else. Rodriguez continued. He said I should forgive you for whatever mistakes you might make, because even the best men fail sometimes, especially when they care too much. Their eyes met, understanding passing between them. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, Jimmy. After Michael died, I just couldn't be what anyone needed. Rodriguez nodded slowly. I understand better now. Grief makes us selfish sometimes. He extended his hand. We have a chance to do something important here, together, for my father, for your son, for the tankers who'll come after us. Walker took the offered hand, feeling a circle closing. Together. That night, Walker sat alone in his quarters, reviewing the day's events. On his desk lay photos he'd brought from home. Michael in his uniform before deploying to Afghanistan. The old tank crew during Desert Storm, Manuel Rodriguez grinning beside him. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Walker opened it to find Harrison. Got a minute, Thunder? Walker gestured him in. Harrison carried a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. Figured we might need this. Harrison poured 2 measures, handing one to Walker. To old friends and new beginnings. They drank silently, the familiar burn a reminder of countless nights in far-flung outposts. There's something else you should know, Harrison said finally. Senator Davis has moved up the committee hearing. We now have 8 weeks, not 10. Walker absorbed this. Why? He sensed momentum shifting, wants to kill the program before we can salvage it. Harrison sighed. Politics is a dirtier battlefield than anything we faced in combat. We'll make it work, Walker said with more confidence than he felt. The old crew brings something the engineers can't calculate, experience, instinct. I hope you're right. Harrison studied his glass. Because if we fail, it's not just this program that dies. It's a century of armored warfare tradition. Knowledge that can't be recovered once it's gone. Walker understood the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just about a weapon system or budget allocation. It was about preserving a legacy of courage, skill, and sacrifice. We won't fail, he said firmly. Not with Manuel's son and his old crew working together. Some things are meant to be, Frank. Harrison smiled slightly. When did you become a philosopher, Thunder? When I had too much time alone to think. Walker raised his glass. To the stallion, may she rise again. To the stallion, Harrison echoed. Outside, night had fallen over Fort Hood. In the distance, the sounds of military life continued. Young soldiers training for wars yet unfought, with weapons yet unbuilt. Walker would ensure they had what they needed when the time came. A tank worthy of the legacy it carried. A weapon that would keep them alive when all else failed. It was what Manuel would have wanted, what Michael would have expected of him. And for the first time in years, Thomas Thunder Walker felt truly alive again, with purpose clear and path set before him. The final mission had begun. Morning light filtered through the hangar windows as Walker surveyed the disassembled stallion. The tank lay exposed, components spread across the floor in organized sections. Engineers and veterans worked side by side, a strange harmony developing between theoretical knowledge and practical experience. Vasquez knelt by the main gun assembly, instructing 2 young engineers on the proper tension for the recoil system. Too tight and it jams in high temperatures. Too loose and your second shot goes wide. There's a sweet spot you can feel but not measure. Walker nodded approval. This was exactly what the project needed. The wisdom that couldn't be quantified or programmed. Rodriguez approached, data tablet in hand. Dark circles under his eyes revealed another sleepless night. Colonel, we've run simulations on your hybrid control system concept. The results are promising. Walker studied the display. The manual overrides increase operational weight by 40 pounds. Acceptable. More than acceptable. The redundancy improves survivability estimates by 23%. Rodriguez swiped to another screen. DeMorrigan wants to see us in the materials lab. She's made a breakthrough with the armor integration. They crossed the facility to Eleanor's domain. The materials laboratory gleamed with scientific precision. High-tech equipment hummed alongside conventional testing apparatus. Eleanor stood before a composite armor panel suspended in a testing frame. Gentlemen, she acknowledged their arrival without looking up from her instruments. I think I've solved our electromagnetic interference problem. Walker raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Not really. I've been working on this issue for months. Eleanor adjusted a setting. The solution was hiding in plain sight. We've been trying to shield the electronics from the armor. Instead, we should be using the armor itself as a ground plane. Rodriguez's expression brightened, turning the problem into the solution. Brilliant. Simple. Once you stop overthinking it. Eleanor turned to Walker. Your veteran crew gave me the idea. Wilson mentioned how they used to run a ground wire from the radio equipment to the hull in Desert Storm to reduce static. Old trick from the field, Walker confirmed. When the manual doesn't work, you improvise. Eleanor activated a demonstration. The armor panel pulsed with energy, while a targeting system nearby remained stable. By reconfiguring the grounding architecture, we can use the armor's conductivity to our advantage. No more interference. Weight impact? Rodriguez asked. Minimal. We're actually removing shielding components, not adding them. Eleanor handed him the technical specifications. We can implement this immediately on the prototype. Walker studied Eleanor with newfound admiration. You never mentioned you were this close to a solution. I wasn't until your team arrived. Eleanor's eyes met his. Sometimes we need fresh perspectives to see what's right in front of us. The moment lingered between them, years falling away. Rodriguez cleared his throat. I'll get the integration team started on implementation. He retreated tactfully, leaving them alone. Your crew speaks highly of you, Eleanor said, turning back to her equipment, especially your ability to make impossible decisions under pressure. Walker moved to examine the armor panel. Tank commanders don't have the luxury of deliberation. You assess, decide, act. Lives depend on speed. William said the same thing. Eleanor's voice softened at the mention of her late husband. He admired you, you know. Even after you chose him, Walker finished. The old wound had scarred over long ago. He was a good man, a better husband than I would have been. Eleanor's hands stilled on her equipment. We never know those paths not taken, do we? She turned to face him fully. I heard about Michael from William before he died, then about your withdrawal after. I worried about you. Walker struggled to maintain his composure. Few people could break through his defenses, but Eleanor had always been one of them. Michael was all I had left. When we lost him, I lost myself for a while. And now, who are you now, Thomas? The question hung in the air, stripped of pretense. Walker had no ready answer. Still figuring that out, he admitted, one day at a time. Eleanor nodded, understanding. Well, for what it's worth, the man I see before me is the one I remember. Stubborn, principled, unwilling to accept failure as an option. Before Walker could respond, Harrison entered the lab, his expression grave. We have a problem. Senator Davis just arrived for an unscheduled inspection. Walker tensed. How much time do we have? He's being escorted from the main gate now, 20 minutes tops. Harrison ran a hand through his white hair. This is a political ambush, not a legitimate oversight visit. Then we control the narrative, Walker decided. Eleanor, can you demonstrate your armor breakthrough? Absolutely. It's our strongest progress point. Good. Rodriguez and I will handle the systems integration update. Walker turned to Harrison. Keep the prototype partially disassembled. We present this as a strategic reconfiguration, not a desperate salvage operation. Harrison nodded approval. I'll brief the team. No one mentions budget concerns or timeline compression. They dispersed to prepare. Walker found Rodriguez organizing the main work area, already directing engineers to present a cohesive image of progress. Senator Davis is a former logistics officer, Walker noted. He'll understand supply chains and production timelines. Focus on manufacturability. Rodriguez nodded. What about the autonomous systems question? He's bound to ask why we're scaling back the AI components. We're not scaling back, we're optimizing for combat conditions. Walker chose his words carefully. Selective automation with human oversight ensures adaptability to battlefield chaos. Political translation, fewer dead Americans makes better headlines than technical superiority, Rodriguez observed wryly. Walker smiled slightly. You're learning, Major. Senator Davis arrived with an entourage of aides and military liaisons. At 62, Davis projected authority, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his posture military despite years in politics. His eyes, however, revealed his true nature to Walker's experienced gaze. Calculating, ambitious, a man who saw people as pieces on a chessboard. General Harrison, Davis extended his hand. Sorry for the short notice. Committee business brought me to Fort Hood, and I couldn't pass up checking on our significant investment. Harrison performed introductions. Davis paused at Walker. Colonel Walker, your reputation precedes you. Davis's smile didn't reach his eyes. I understood you'd retired to Texas. Sometimes duty calls us back, Senator, Walker replied evenly, especially when national security is at stake. A flicker of annoyance crossed Davis's face. Indeed, though in my experience, national security is best served by forward-thinking approaches, not clinging to outdated platforms. The challenge hung in the air. Walker refused to rise to the bait. Perhaps you'd like to see how we're integrating both traditional reliability and cutting-edge technology in the Stallion program. The tour proceeded, each team presenting their progress. Eleanor demonstrated the armor breakthrough, explaining the technical aspects in terms accessible to non-specialists. Davis showed genuine interest, asking pertinent questions. The weapons systems team, led by Vasquez, showcased the improved main gun with its hybrid targeting system. "So you've retained manual sighting capabilities alongside the digital system?" Davis asked. "Yes, Senator. Combat conditions can degrade electronic systems. The manual backup ensures continued fighting effectiveness," Vasquez explained. "At increased training requirements and reduced efficiency," Davis noted. "At increased survivability, sir?" Vasquez countered respectfully. "A tank that can't fight after taking a hit becomes a multi-million-dollar coffin." Davis conceded the point with a tight nod and moved on. Walker caught Vasquez's eye, giving a subtle nod of approval. The final stop was the systems integration station where Rodriguez presented the command interfaces. His explanation was flawless, technical without being impenetrable, strategic without seeming defensive. "Impressive work, Major," Davis acknowledged. "Though I note you've scaled back the autonomous operation capabilities from the original specification." "Refined rather than reduced, Senator," Rodriguez replied smoothly. "Our combat simulation data revealed that human decision-making remains superior in complex environments, particularly when facing adaptive adversaries. Data which conveniently supports the continued necessity for human tank crews," Davis observed. "Data which reflects battlefield reality, Senator," Walker interjected. "Our adversaries are developing systems to specifically counteract autonomous vehicles. Human unpredictability remains our greatest tactical advantage." Davis turned to Walker, sizing him up. "Colonel, you've commanded tanks in combat. Tell me honestly, do you truly believe heavy armor remains relevant in an age of precision, munitions, drones, and networked battlefields?" The room quieted, the question cut to the heart of their endeavor. "Senator, I've watched technology transform warfare throughout my career," Walker began. "Each advance was supposed to make tanks obsolete, yet our adversaries continue to develop and deploy heavy armor. Do you know why?" Davis waited, expression neutral. "Because controlling territory ultimately requires human presence. Because electronic warfare can disable the most sophisticated systems. Because when the networks go down and the drones can't fly, you still need warriors on the ground who can fight with or without technological advantage." Walker held the senator's gaze. "The Stallion XP2 represents the best of both worlds: technological superiority when conditions permit, and rugged reliability when they don't." Davis considered this. "An eloquent defense, Colonel, but sentiment doesn't win wars. Cost-effectiveness and technological superiority do. With respect, Senator, wars are ultimately won by the will and skill of those fighting them," Walker countered. "Technology is a force multiplier, not a replacement for human judgment." Davis smiled thinly. "A philosophical disagreement we can continue another time. For now, I've seen enough." He turned to Harrison. "General, I'll expect a formal progress report next week. The committee remains concerned about cost overruns and timeline slippage." "You'll have it, Senator," Harrison assured him. After Davis and his entourage departed, Harrison gathered the core team. "That went better than expected, but don't get comfortable. Davis was looking for ammunition to kill the program. He'll be back with more specific challenges." "At least we bought some time," Rodriguez noted. "The armor breakthrough alone justifies continued funding." "Don't underestimate political determination," Walker warned. "Davis has staked his reputation on next-generation autonomous systems. Our success threatens his vision." "Then we make the Stallion too good to kill," Eleanor declared. "Deliver a tank so clearly superior that even Davis can't justify cancellation." Walker nodded agreement. "Exactly, which means we have no time to waste. Let's get back to work." As the team dispersed, Harrison held Walker back. "That was dangerous, challenging Davis directly." "Someone needed to speak the truth," Walker replied. "Davis needs to understand what's at stake beyond politics." "Politics is all he understands," Harrison countered. "And he has the power to end this program with a single committee vote." Walker's expression hardened. "Then we give him something more powerful to consider. Public opinion. Soldiers' lives. American military dominance." Harrison studied his old friend. "You never did learn to play the political game, did you?" "Never saw the point," Walker admitted. "The battlefield doesn't care about political convenience." "This is Washington's battlefield, Thunder. Different rules apply." "Then we change the game," Walker decided. Rodriguez mentioned Centaur Defense Systems as Davis's main donor. What do we know about their autonomous vehicle program? Harrison frowned. Not much, it's highly classified, some kind of drone tank hybrid. Why? Because understanding your adversary's capabilities is basic strategy, Walker replied. We need to know what we're really competing against. I'll see what I can find out through official channels, Harrison promised. But be careful, Thunder. Davis has powerful allies. So do we, Walker reminded him. Men who've actually fought in tanks. Men whose lives depend on getting this right. Later that evening, Walker found himself walking the perimeter of the base, a habit from deployment days. The Texas night was warm, stars brilliant overhead. His mind churned with the day's events and the challenges ahead. A vehicle approached, slowing as it neared. Eleanor's sedan, she rolled down the window. Taking your constitutional? Old habits, Walker acknowledged. Care for company? Walker hesitated only briefly before climbing in. They drove in companionable silence for several minutes, the base's lights receding behind them. I come out here sometimes to think, Eleanor explained as they reached a small rise overlooking the sprawling facility, away from the equations and test results. She parked and they sat watching the distant lights. The moment felt suspended in time, removed from the pressures of the project. Davis wasn't just fishing today, Eleanor said finally. He was confirming his decision to cancel the program. Walker turned to her. You seem certain. I know the signs. I've seen programs die before. She sighed. All the technical successes in the world won't matter if the political decision is already made. What's your stake in this, Eleanor? Why does this project matter to you personally? She considered the question. William died because his vehicle's armor failed. An IED in Fallujah, the same one that Manuel saved you from. Her voice remained steady despite the painful memory. I've spent 15 years ensuring other soldiers have better protection. And they do, because of you, Walker said softly. But it's never enough. There's always another threat, another weapon designed to defeat our defenses. Eleanor turned to face him. This project isn't just another tank to me, Thomas. It's a promise I made to William, that his death would mean something. Walker understood completely. I made a similar promise when Michael died, that his sacrifice wouldn't be wasted. Their shared grief created a connection deeper than their past romance or present collaboration. They were two souls marked by loss, trying to create meaning from tragedy. What happened to him, Thomas? You never talk about it. Walker stared into the darkness. He rarely spoke of Michael's death, but Eleanor deserved the truth. Special operations mission in the Hindu Kush. His unit was ambushed. Michael stayed behind to cover the evacuation of wounded teammates. The words came with difficulty. He held off the enemy long enough for everyone else to get out, then called an airstrike on his own position when he was overrun. Eleanor reached across the console, taking his hand. He died as he lived, with honor and courage. Walker nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He was a better man than me. I doubt that, Eleanor said gently. He learned from you. They sat in silence, hands still joined, the weight of shared grief somehow lighter for being shared. We should get back, Walker said eventually. Early start tomorrow. Eleanor nodded, releasing his hand to start the car. As they drove back toward the base, Walker felt something shift between them. Not romance rekindled, but something perhaps more valuable. A partnership forged in common purpose and mutual understanding. The coming days would test them all, but for the first time since agreeing to join the project, Walker felt genuine hope, not just for the stallion's survival, but for his own. Chapter 5, Warriors and Machines. Dawn broke over Fort Hood as Walker entered the main hangar. The space hummed with activity despite the early hour. The veteran crew had instilled their work ethic in the younger engineers, creating a round-the-clock operation. Walker approached the partially reassembled Stallion XP2. The tank looked different now. Leaner, more purposeful. Less like a technology showcase and more like a weapon of war. She's starting to look right, Vasquez commented, joining Walker. Like something that could actually fight and win. Walker nodded agreement. How's the weapon system integration coming? Good. We've got the main gun calibrated with both electronic and manual sights. Gunner can switch between them in under 2 seconds. Vasquez gestured to the turret. Autoloader is still giving us headaches, though. Wilson's working with the engineering team on a hybrid solution. Across the hangar, Wilson stood surrounded by mechanical components, demonstrating a loading sequence to attentive engineers. His massive hands moved with surprising delicacy among the precision parts. And Thompson? In the simulator with Rodriguez. They're testing the new drive system under combat conditions. Walker nodded approval. The team had found its rhythm. Veterans providing practical wisdom, engineers applying technical expertise, each respecting the other's contribution. Eleanor approached, lab coat over her civilian clothes. Thomas, we need to talk. Her tone suggested urgency. They moved to a quiet corner of the facility. What's wrong? I received a job offer last night from Centaur Defense Systems. Eleanor's expression was troubled. Very generous terms, leading their materials division. Walker's eyes narrowed. Davis, almost certainly. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. They're trying to poach you, weaken the project. Eleanor nodded. They specifically mentioned that my work would be more appreciated in an environment committed to next-generation systems rather than legacy platforms. Are you considering it? Walker kept his tone neutral despite the surge of concern. Of course not. Eleanor seemed offended by the question. But it confirms what we suspected. Davis is playing hardball. Did they approach anyone else from the team? Not that I know of, but I'm probably the most valuable target. Without the armor breakthrough, the rest of the systems integration becomes moot. Walker considered the implications. We need to warn Harrison. If they're targeting key personnel, they might try other tactics as well. They located Harrison in his office, reviewing budget allocations. His expression darkened as Eleanor described the job offer. Classic corporate raiding tactic, Harrison growled. I've seen it before with defense contractors. Identify the linchpin talent and make them an offer they can't refuse. Except Eleanor did refuse, Walker pointed out. This time. But they'll keep coming, and they might approach others. Harrison leaned back in his chair. We need to accelerate the timeline. The longer this drags out, the more vulnerable we become. The integration testing is scheduled for next week, Eleanor noted. We could move it up if the teams push harder. Do it, Harrison decided, and keep this between us for now. No need to create paranoia in the ranks. As they left Harrison's office, Walker studied Eleanor. You didn't mention the offer amount. A small smile played at her lips. 3 times my current salary, full research budget, complete academic freedom. Walker whistled softly. Quite the golden handcuffs. Money has never been my primary motivation. Eleanor's expression turned serious. Thomas, there's something else you should know. The recruiter mentioned they're particularly interested in my work on reactive armor composites. That's highly classified information. Walker stopped walking. They shouldn't know you were working on that specifically. Exactly. Someone's feeding them inside information. The implications settled heavily between them. We have a leak. Eleanor nodded, or worse, a plant. Walker considered their options. We can't start a witch hunt. It would destroy team cohesion at a critical moment. Agreed, but we need to be careful about what information we share, even internally. I'll talk to Rodriguez and the veteran crew. Keep critical developments compartmentalized without raising alarms. Walker's expression hardened, and I'll watch for anyone showing too much interest in areas outside their direct responsibility. They parted, each returning to their respective duties with a new wariness. Walker found Rodriguez in the simulator room, reviewing test results with Thompson. The sophisticated simulator recreated combat conditions with impressive fidelity, testing both vehicle performance and crew reactions. Walker waited until they finished before drawing Rodriguez aside. A word, Major. Once alone, Walker explained the situation without mentioning Eleanor specifically. We have reason to believe project details are being leaked to Centaur Defense Systems. Rodriguez's expression darkened. That explains some things. One of our software engineers mentioned receiving unusual questions from an oversight committee that doesn't exist. Who? Chen, Lisa Chen, works on the targeting system algorithms. Walker nodded. Keep this between us for now, but compartmentalize critical information, especially anything related to De Morgan's armor development. Understood, sir. Rodriguez hesitated. Do you think Senator Davis is directly involved? Politics and defense contracts make for murky waters, Walker replied diplomatically. But the timing suggests coordination at minimum. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. My father used to say the hardest part of being a soldier was dealing with the politics behind the war. Your father was a wise man. They were interrupted by an excited technician. Major Rodriguez, Colonel Walker, you need to see this. We've completed the first full systems integration test. They followed him to the main control room where monitors displayed test results from the partially assembled Stallion. All systems functioning within parameters, the technician reported proudly. Power management issues resolved. Targeting system remains stable even with the new armor configuration. Rodriguez studied the data. Impressive, we're ahead of schedule. Run it again, Walker instructed. Different conditions, maximum heat, then cold, then electronic warfare countermeasures. The technician looked uncertain. That's not in the test protocol, sir. It is now, Walker insisted. In combat, everything fails under the worst possible conditions. We need to know our margins. Rodriguez backed him up. Do it. Full environmental range testing. And initiate the fail-safe protocols halfway through to simulate battle damage. As the technicians reprogrammed the test sequence, Rodriguez turned to Walker. You're expecting problems. I'm expecting reality, Walker corrected. No plan survives contact with the enemy. No technology survives combat conditions unchanged. The new test began. Initially, the Stallion performed admirably, maintaining operational parameters despite increasingly harsh conditions. Then, as the simulated temperature reached desert maximum and electronic countermeasures intensified, systems began to degrade. Power fluctuation in the targeting computers, a technician reported. Cooling systems struggling to maintain optimal temperature. Walker watched closely. How's the manual backup performing? Stable. Mechanical systems unaffected by the electronic countermeasures. Rodriguez nodded approval. That's what we wanted. Graceful degradation, not catastrophic failure. The test continued, stressing the tank's systems to their limits. Most held, though performance decreased. Some failed but had functional backups. Only one system failed completely. The long-range communications array. That's our next focus, Walker decided. A tank cut off from command is vulnerable regardless of its other capabilities. Rodriguez made notes. I'll have the communications team revise their approach. Maybe a return to analog for backup. Good thinking. Sometimes older technology is more resilient precisely because it's simpler. As they left the control room, Walker felt a growing confidence. The Stallion was taking shape as a true combat vehicle, not just a technology showcase. The hybrid approach was working. They spent the afternoon in detailed reviews with each team, adjusting priorities based on the test results. By evening, a revised work plan was in place, focused on addressing the vulnerabilities exposed by Walker's enhanced testing regimen. As the day shift ended, Walker found himself alone in the hangar, studying the Stallion. The tank represented more than just a weapon system now. It had become a symbol of balance between innovation and tradition, technology and human judgment. She's looking good. Walker turned to find Thompson approaching. The former tank driver studied the vehicle with a professional eye. Better than good, Walker agreed. She's becoming what she needs to be. Reminds me of our old girl from Desert Storm. Thompson ran his hand along the hull. Not the prettiest, but reliable when it counted. They stood in companionable silence, two old warriors remembering. Something's bothering you, Thompson observed. Always perceptive, the former medic had an uncanny ability to read people. Walker hesitated, then decided to trust his old crew member. We may have a security leak, someone feeding information to Centaur defense systems. Thompson absorbed this without visible reaction. Suspected as much. Too many coincidences lately. You've noticed something? People asking questions outside their areas. Documentation disappearing briefly, then reappearing. Little things that add up. Walker nodded. Thompson had always noticed details others missed. Any specific suspects? No one I'd name without evidence, but I'd watch the software team closely. They have access to almost everything through the integrated systems. I'll keep that in mind. Thompson studied him. There's something else, something personal. Walker smiled slightly. Still reading me like a book, Doc? Some people are easier reads than others. You and Dr. Morgan have history. It wasn't a question. Walker saw no point in denial. Ancient history. Doesn't look so ancient from where I stand. Thompson's tone remained neutral. She's good people, Thunder. Lost her husband like you lost your son. Maybe you both deserve a second chance at something. Walker was saved from responding by the arrival of a young lieutenant. Colonel Walker, General Harrison requests your presence in the secure communications room immediately. Walker exchanged glances with Thompson. We'll continue this discussion later. No, we won't, Thompson replied with a knowing smile. But think about what I said. Walker found Harrison in the secure communications room with Rodriguez. A satellite feed displayed on the main screen showed Russian tanks on maneuvers near the Ukrainian border. New intelligence, Harrison explained without preamble. The Russians have deployed their T-14 Armada units in combat configuration. These images were captured yesterday. Walker studied the footage. The T-14 represented Russia's most advanced tank, featuring an unmanned turret, active protection systems, and a 125mm smoothbore gun, a formidable adversary. This changes the strategic calculation, Harrison continued. Pentagon analysts believe deployment of the T-14 indicates potential escalation within 3 to 6 months. Rodriguez looked concerned. Our timeline just became more critical. Walker nodded agreement. The Stallion needs to be field ready sooner than we thought, not just for program survival, but for national security. Harrison switched to another feed, this one showing Chinese armored vehicles and desert training exercises. Similar activity from our other peer competitor. They're testing their latest model in conditions resembling the Middle East. Coordinated demonstrations of force, Walker's observed. They're signaling capabilities and intentions. Exactly, which means our work here just became a top strategic priority, not just a budget line item. Harrison turned to face them fully. I've been authorized to allocate additional emergency funding to the Stallion program, but with a compressed timeline. We need a field-testable prototype in 4 weeks, not 8. Rodriguez looked stunned. 4 weeks? That's barely possible even if everything goes perfectly. Then we make sure everything goes perfectly, Walker stated flatly. We now have a real-world imperative, not just a bureaucratic deadline. Harrison nodded approval. I knew you'd see it that way, Thunder. I've already adjusted the security protocols. The project is now classified at a higher level, fewer people with full access. That might help with our leak problem, Walker noted. Precisely. I've also authorized round-the-clock work schedules and priority material allocation. Harrison's expression was grim but determined. Gentlemen, what happens in this facility over the next month could determine the outcome of conflicts we don't even know are coming yet. The gravity of the situation settled on them. This was no longer just about saving a weapons program from political maneuvering. It was about ensuring American combat readiness in an increasingly unstable world. We'll make it happen, General, Rodriguez promised. I know you will, Major. Harrison dismissed them with a nod. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow begins the final push. As they left the secure area, Rodriguez turned to Walker. Do you think it's possible? 4 weeks? Walker considered the question carefully. With the right people, focused on the right priorities, working for the right reasons? Yes, not easy, but possible. My father used to say, anything worth doing never is, Rodriguez replied with a slight smile. Smart man, your father. They parted, each lost in thought about the challenge ahead. Walker headed toward the officers' quarters, mind already reorganizing priorities and timelines. The compressed schedule would require difficult decisions about what features to include and what to sacrifice. As he approached his quarters, Walker noticed a figure waiting by his door. Eleanor. Long day? She asked as he approached. About to get longer, Walker replied. Harrison's compressed the timeline. 4 weeks to field-testable prototype. Eleanor's eyes widened. That's ambitious, impossible, necessary? Walker unlocked his door. All of the above. Come in. I could use your input on prioritization. The small apartment was spartanly furnished but meticulously organized. Walker poured 2 glasses of water, motioning Eleanor to the small table where he spread out component schematics. With 4 weeks, we need to decide what's essential and what's aspirational, he began. The armor integration is non-negotiable. Same for the hybrid targeting system and manual backups. Eleanor studied the schematics. The active protection system might need to be scaled back. It's sophisticated but complicated to integrate. Agreed. Basic countermeasures only for now. Smoke dispensers, IR jammers. They worked for hours, identifying critical systems and acceptable compromises. The plan that emerged was ambitious but achievable. A Stallion that couldn't do everything originally envisioned, but could do the most important things exceptionally well. This could work, Eleanor concluded, reviewing their final list. Challenging but feasible. Walker nodded agreement. We'll present it to the team tomorrow. He checked his watch, surprised to find it was well past midnight. You should get some rest. Eleanor gathered her notes. You too, though I suspect you won't. Walker smiled slightly. Another hour or two, old habits. She paused at the door. Thomas, about what Thompson said. Walker looked up, startled. You heard that? I was approaching when the lieutenant arrived. Didn't mean to eavesdrop, but... She shrugged apologetically. Walker felt uncharacteristically awkward. Doc always did have a tendency to meddle. He's not wrong, though, is he? Eleanor's gaze was direct. About us deserving second chances? The question hung in the air between them, laden with possibility. Eleanor, I'm not the man you knew 30 years ago. Loss changes you, hardens you. You think I don't know that? Her voice was gentle but firm. I buried my husband, Thomas. Raised our daughter alone. I know exactly how loss reshapes a life. Walker had no ready answer. I'm not suggesting we recapture the past, Eleanor continued. Just that perhaps we've been given this opportunity to work together for a reason, and that reason might extend beyond professional collaboration. Before Walker could respond, Eleanor smiled. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. Now get some rest, Colonel. We have a tank to build. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. Walker remained at the table, mind now occupied with possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider in years. Thompson's words echoed. Maybe you both deserve a second chance at something. Walker pushed the thought aside, returning to the schematics. The mission came first. Personal considerations could wait until after the stallion proved itself. Yet as he worked into the night, Eleanor's presence seemed to linger in the small apartment. Her intelligence, her strength, her understanding of both his professional dedication and personal loss. For the first time in years, Thomas Walker permitted himself to imagine a future beyond duty and obligation. A future that might include companionship, connection, perhaps even happiness. It was a dangerous thought for a man who had walled himself off from such possibilities. But once admitted, it refused to be dismissed entirely. Chapter 6. Crisis in Washington. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. The Stallion XP2 took shape rapidly as teams worked around the clock. Walker established a military-style rotation, ensuring critical personnel received adequate rest while maintaining constant progress. The veteran crew proved invaluable, their practical experience resolving issues that might have stalled younger engineers for days. Vasquez personally calibrated the main gun's fire control system. Thompson redesigned the driver's station for combat efficiency. Wilson perfected the autoloader's mechanical override. 3 weeks into the compressed timeline, Walker stood with Rodriguez in the control room, watching as the Stallion underwent its most comprehensive testing yet. The tank performed flawlessly, meeting or exceeding specifications across all critical systems. We're actually going to make it, Rodriguez marveled. 4 weeks seemed impossible. Never doubt motivated professionals with a clear mission, Walker replied, especially when half of them are stubborn old tankers too ornery to accept failure. Rodriguez smiled. My father would be proud of what we've accomplished here. He would indeed, both of the tank and of you. Walker meant it sincerely. Rodriguez had proven himself not just a brilliant engineer but an effective leader, balancing technical requirements with practical combat considerations. Harrison entered, his expression unreadable. Gentlemen, we need to talk, privately. They followed him to his office, concern growing at his grave demeanor. Senator Davis has moved up the Armed Services Committee review, Harrison announced without preamble. It's now scheduled for tomorrow morning in Washington. Walker tensed. That's not enough notice for proper preparation. Exactly his intention. Harrison's tone was bitter. He's attempting to catch us unprepared, force us to present preliminary results without context or explanation. Can you request a delay? Rodriguez asked. Already tried. Denied due to pressing budget considerations. Harrison's quotation marks were audible in his tone. This is a political ambush, pure and simple. Walker considered their options. Then we bring the fight to him. Present our results with absolute confidence. No apologies, no hedging. It's not that simple, Harrison countered. Davis has stacked the committee with allies. They've already been briefed by Centaur Defense Systems on their alternative platform. So we're walking into a fixed game, Walker concluded. Harrison nodded grimly. Essentially, but we still need to make our case. The Pentagon brass will be watching. Even if Davis succeeds in killing the program, we need to ensure they understand what they're losing. Who's presenting? Rodriguez asked. All of us. You'll handle the technical briefing. I'll address strategic implications. And Thunder. Harrison turned to Walker. You'll speak to combat effectiveness and crew survivability. Your combat experience gives you credibility even Davis can't easily dismiss. Walker nodded. Eleanor should join us. The armor integration is our strongest technological advantage. Already arranged. She'll meet us in Washington tonight. Harrison checked his watch. The plane leaves in 3 hours. Gather what you need and meet at the airfield. As Harrison and Rodriguez left to prepare, Walker remained behind. Frank, what aren't you telling us? Harrison sighed heavily. My sources in Washington say Davis has already drafted the committee's recommendation to terminate the program, regardless of our presentation. Then why go through the charade? Because the committee vote still has to happen officially, and because there's a wild card, General Maxwell, the Army Chief of Staff, will be observing. He has the authority to override the committee under national security provisions if he's convinced the stallion is critical to combat readiness. Walker absorbed this. So we're really presenting to Maxwell, not the committee. Exactly, Davis knows this, which is why he'll do everything possible to undermine our credibility. Harrison's expression hardened. This isn't just about the stallion anymore, Thunder. It's about the future of American armored warfare. Then we better make a hell of a case, Walker replied. I'll get the veteran crew to prepare combat readiness documentation from their perspective. First-hand accounts from Desert Storm and Iraq carry weight with old war horses like Maxwell. Good thinking. Harrison hesitated. There's one more thing. Our leak has been identified. Walker's attention sharpened. Who? Lisa Chen, software engineer, caught transmitting technical data to an external server traced to Centaur. Military police took her into custody this morning. Rodriguez mentioned her, said she was asking unusual questions. Walker shook his head. Corporate espionage or something worse? Too early to tell, but the timing suggests coordination with Davis's accelerated committee review. Harrison's expression was grim. We're fighting on multiple fronts here, Thunder. Nothing new there, Walker replied. We prepare as thoroughly as possible in the time available, present with absolute conviction, and adapt to whatever comes. Basic combat doctrine. Harrison smiled slightly. Always the tanker. See you at the airfield. Walker spent the next 2 hours with the veteran crew, compiling combat experiences that demonstrated the need for human operators in tanks. Vasquez contributed accounts of split-second targeting decisions no AI could replicate. Thompson detailed navigation challenges in GPS-denied environments. Wilson described ammunition selection choices based on battlefield conditions no sensor could adequately assess. By the time Walker reached the airfield, he had a powerful collection of real-world examples illustrating why the Stallion's hybrid approach was not just preferable, but essential. The flight to Washington was tense, each member of the team preparing in their own way. Harrison made calls to former colleagues, attempting to gauge the political landscape. Rodriguez reviewed technical specifications, anticipating potential challenges. Walker studied the committee members' backgrounds, identifying potential allies and confirmed opponents. They landed at Andrews Air Force Base in early evening. A military vehicle transported them to a hotel near the Capitol where Eleanor waited in the lobby, professional in a conservative suit, tablet, computer in hand. I've reviewed the committee membership, she began without preamble. 7 members total. 3 are firmly in Davis's camp, 2 are neutral, and 2 generally favor traditional defense platforms. So we need to convince both neutrals and hold the traditionalists, Harrison concluded, and hope Maxwell is persuaded regardless of the committee vote, Walker added. They gathered in Harrison's suite to finalize their strategy. Each would present their section, focusing on clarity and confidence rather than technical complexity. They anticipated questions and prepared concise answers. By midnight, they had a coordinated approach that played to each person's strengths. Get some rest, Harrison advised as they concluded. Tomorrow will test all of us. Walker walked Eleanor to her room. Both were too preoccupied with the coming challenge for personal considerations. Yet Walker found her presence steadying. We've done good work, he offered. No matter what happens tomorrow, the Stallion XP2 is a superior combat vehicle. Eleanor nodded. I believe that, but belief doesn't always triumph over politics. Then we make it about more than politics. We make it about American lives and national security. Walker's determination was evident in his voice. Davis may have rigged the game, but we still get to play our cards. Always the optimist, Eleanor observed with a small smile. Realist, Walker corrected. I've seen worse odds in combat, and we're still standing. They paused at her door. Get some sleep, Eleanor. Tomorrow needs your best. You too, Thomas. She held his gaze for a moment. Whatever happens, I'm glad we had this chance to work together again. The unspoken implications hung between them. Walker nodded acknowledgement. So am I. Morning brought clearing skies over Washington. The team gathered for a brief breakfast before proceeding to the Capitol in official vehicles. Walker wore his dress uniform, the rows of ribbons and medals silent testimony to his combat experience. The committee room was imposing, designed to intimidate those testifying. A long curved table where the senators would sit faced a single witness table. Observers' chairs filled the space behind, already occupied by military officers, defense industry representatives, and congressional staffers. Walker immediately identified General Maxwell, a stocky, white-haired officer whose chest bore even more decorations than his own. Maxwell had commanded armored divisions in multiple conflicts. His opinion would carry significant weight regardless of the committee's formal recommendation. Senator Davis entered with the other committee members, taking the central position. His expression revealed nothing as he called the session to order. Today, we review the Stallion Tank Modernization Program, currently over budget and behind schedule. Davis began, setting an immediately negative tone. General Harrison, please begin your presentation. Harrison approached the witness table with military bearing. His presentation was concise and powerful, emphasizing the strategic necessity of maintaining armored warfare capabilities in an era of great power competition. He highlighted recent Russian and Chinese tank deployments without revealing classified intelligence sources. In conclusion, Senators, the modernized Stallion represents not just a weapons platform, but a strategic capability we cannot afford to lose in an increasingly unstable world. Davis's expression remained neutral. Thank you, General. Major Rodriguez, your technical assessment, please. Rodriguez took Harrison's place, his youth contrasting with the senior officers and senators. Yet his presentation demonstrated both expertise and maturity. He outlined the Stallion XP2's capabilities honestly, acknowledging limitations while emphasizing advantages. His explanation of the hybrid control systems was particularly effective, illustrating how human judgment and artificial intelligence complemented each other. The Stallion XP2 represents the optimal balance between technological advancement and combat-proven reliability, Rodriguez concluded. It is designed to fight and win in the most demanding conditions against the most advanced adversaries. Questions followed, some genuinely seeking information, others clearly designed to undermine Rodriguez's credibility. He handled them adeptly, never becoming defensive or technical to the point of incomprehension. Dr. Morgan, please present your findings on the armor systems, Davis directed. Eleanor's presentation was both technically impressive and accessible to non-specialists. She explained the revolutionary nature of the new composite armor without revealing classified details, emphasizing the protection it offered to American soldiers. This armor technology represents a generational advance in crew survivability, she stated firmly. It has been successfully integrated with all electronic systems, resolving the interference issues that initially challenged the program. Again, questions followed. Eleanor handled them with professional precision, particularly effective when explaining complex material science in straightforward terms. Finally, Colonel Walker, please address combat effectiveness, Davis instructed, a slight edge entering his voice. Walker approached this witness table, aware of all eyes upon him. Unlike the others, he brought no slides or technical diagrams. Instead, he placed before him a single sheet containing the names of tankers who had died in combat during his career. Senators, I've commanded tanks in combat across 3 decades in multiple conflicts. I've lost friends and colleagues to enemy fire, equipment failures, in the fog of war. Walker's voice carried natural authority born of command experience. The men and women who crew our tanks deserve the best protection and capabilities we can provide. Not the most sophisticated or the cheapest, but the most effective under actual combat conditions. He proceeded to share real-world examples from Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan, illustrating how human judgment repeatedly proved decisive in complex battlefield environments. His testimony was powerful precisely because it came from direct experience rather than theory or simulation. The Stallion XP2 represents the right balance between technological advancement and combat practicality, Walker concluded. It leverages artificial intelligence where appropriate while preserving the irreplaceable value of human judgment in chaotic combat environments. Most importantly, it is designed to bring American soldiers home alive even when everything goes wrong. A momentary silence followed his testimony. Walker had spoken with the moral authority of a warrior who had led others in combat, and even Davis seemed momentarily affected. The silence was broken by a committee member Walker had identified as potentially sympathetic. Colonel Walker, in your professional opinion, could fully autonomous tanks replace crewed vehicles like the Stallion in the near future? No, Senator, they cannot, Walker replied without hesitation. Autonomous vehicles excel in predictable environments with clear objectives. Battlefields are inherently unpredictable, objectives frequently change, and critical decisions often rely on intuition and experience no algorithm can replicate. Davis leaned forward. Yet other countries are pursuing fully autonomous platforms. Are you suggesting the United States should ignore technological advancement in favor of traditional platforms. Not at all, Senator. I'm advocating for intelligent integration of technology that enhances human capabilities rather than attempts to replace human judgment. Walker met Davis's gaze directly. Our adversaries pursue full autonomy partly because they lack experienced tank commanders and crews. America's greatest military advantage has always been our professional, adaptable warriors. The Stallion XP2 leverages that advantage while incorporating cutting-edge technology where it genuinely improves combat effectiveness. Before Davis could respond, General Maxwell spoke from the observers section. If I might ask a question, Senator? Davis could hardly refuse the Army's most senior officer. Of course, General. Maxwell stood. Colonel Walker, you commanded tanks in Desert Storm where American armored forces achieved unprecedented success against a numerically superior enemy. In your assessment, would fully autonomous tanks have achieved similar results? No, General, they would not, Walker answered firmly. The decisive factor at 73 Easting and similar engagements wasn't just technological superiority, but the ability of American tank commanders to make rapid, adaptive decisions as the situation evolved. No pre-programmed response could have anticipated the chaos of actual battle or adjusted as effectively as human commanders did. Maxwell nodded, satisfied. His intervention sent a clear message to the committee. The professional military had serious reservations about abandoning crude tanks. Davis appeared momentarily discomfited, but recovered quickly. Thank you for your testimony. The committee will now hear from Centaur Defense Systems regarding their autonomous combat vehicle program. Walker and the team were directed to observer seats as Centaur's representatives took the witness table. Their presentation was polished and impressive, featuring sleek autonomous vehicles operating in simulated combat environments. The technological display clearly impressed several committee members. What followed was essentially a sales pitch, rather than a balanced assessment. Centaur's CEO, a former Pentagon official, emphasized cost savings, reduced risk to personnel, and technological leadership. Conspicuously absent was any discussion of performance under actual combat conditions or resilience when systems failed. Walker exchanged glances with Harrison. The contrast between approaches was stark. The Stallion team had presented honestly about both capabilities and limitations, while Centaur offered an idealized vision with minimal acknowledgement of practical challenges. When questions began, the difference became even more apparent. Centaur representatives struggled with inquiries about performance in GPS-denied environments, electronic warfare countermeasures, and decision-making in ethically complex scenarios. General Maxwell intervened again. Has any Centaur autonomous vehicle been tested under conditions replicating actual combat, not simulations, but dust, extreme temperatures, communications jamming, and unpredictable obstacles? The CEO hesitated. Our testing program includes environmental stress factors, General, but we believe simulation provides more consistent, measurable results. That wasn't my question, Maxwell pressed. Has any Centaur vehicle been subjected to the same battlefield conditions American tanks actually face in combat? Our testing program is still evolving, General. The non-answer was revealing. Davis attempted to redirect the questioning, but the damage was done. Maxwell had highlighted the fundamental difference between theoretical capabilities and combat-proven performance. After Centaur concluded, Davis announced a brief recess before the committee would deliver its recommendation. As they filed out, Walker found himself beside General Maxwell in the hallway. Impressive testimony, Colonel, Maxwell commented. Reminded me why experienced combat officers remain our most valuable military asset. Thank you, General. The Stallion XP2 deserves a fair evaluation based on actual combat requirements, not political considerations. Maxwell's expression revealed nothing. Indeed, politics and warfare make uncomfortable bedfellows. He moved on without further comment, leaving Walker to wonder where the Army's senior officer truly stood. Harrison joined Walker. Maxwell's intervention was unexpected. But welcome, Walker replied. He forced the comparison between real-world testing and simulations. Still, Davis controls the committee. The recommendation is likely predetermined. Harrison looked grimly resigned. At least we made our case effectively. The Pentagon will understand what they're losing if the program is terminated. Eleanor and Rodriguez joined them, both cautiously optimistic about their presentations, but realistic about the political dynamics. Whatever happens, Rodriguez said quietly, we built something important, something my father would be proud of. Walker nodded agreement, and demonstrated that experience and innovation can work together rather than in opposition. When the committee reconvened, the atmosphere was tense. Davis called the session to order with practiced authority. After consideration of testimony and program documentation, this committee is prepared to make its recommendation regarding the Stallion Modernization Program, Davis announced. Before we proceed, General Maxwell has requested to address the committee. This was unexpected. Maxwell approached the witness table with the gravity his position commanded. Senators, I speak not just as Army Chief of Staff, but as an officer who has commanded tanks in combat across 4 decades. Maxwell's voice carried the weight of experience. The question before you transcends politics or procurement processes. It concerns American combat effectiveness in future conflicts we cannot yet predict. The room was utterly silent as Maxwell continued. Based on the testimony presented today and classified intelligence I am not at liberty to discuss in this forum, I am invoking my authority under National Security Directive 17 to designate the Stallion XP2 program as critical to national security. Davis appeared stunned. General, that's highly irregular. So is the accelerated timeline of this review, Senator, Maxwell replied evenly. The directive grants me authority to preserve capabilities deemed essential to national defense, regardless of budgetary or political considerations. The committee still has oversight responsibility, Davis countered, visibly struggling to maintain composure. Indeed, and the committee will receive quarterly progress reports. Maxwell's tone brooked no argument. But the program will continue under direct Pentagon supervision with guaranteed funding through the prototype and initial production phases. The bureaucratic equivalent of a nuclear option had just been deployed. Walker exchanged glances with Harrison, both men carefully controlling their expressions. This committee will still issue its recommendation, Davis stated, his tone icy. Of course, Senator. And that recommendation will be given appropriate consideration alongside operational requirements. Maxwell's diplomatic phrasing couldn't disguise the reality. He had effectively removed the program from congressional control. Davis called for a vote. As expected, the committee voted 4-3 to recommend termination of the Stallion program, but Maxwell's intervention had rendered the vote largely symbolic. This hearing is adjourned, Davis announced curtly, gathering his papers and departing without further comment. As the room cleared, Maxwell approached the Stallion team. You've bought yourselves time and funding, but also made a powerful enemy. Senator Davis won't forget this. Thank you for your support, General, Harrison replied. I support American combat effectiveness, not specific programs, Maxwell corrected. The Stallion XP2 must prove itself worthy of the political capital I've just expended. Don't disappoint me. With that, he departed, leaving the team to absorb what had just occurred. Did we just win? Rodriguez asked uncertainly. We survived, Walker corrected. Now we have to deliver on everything we promised. And more, Harrison added. Maxwell just placed his professional reputation behind our program. Failure isn't an option. As they left the Capitol, Walker felt both vindication and renewed pressure. The Stallion would continue, but under intense scrutiny from both supporters and detractors. Every aspect of performance would be questioned, every milestone critically examined. Yet for the first time since joining the program, Walker felt genuine confidence, not just in the tank they were building, but in the team that had come together to build it. Veterans and engineers, experience and innovation, the old and the new finding common purpose. Eleanor fell into step beside him as they walked toward their waiting vehicle. Quite the dramatic conclusion. Not a conclusion, Walker replied, just the end of the beginning. She smiled slightly. Always the strategist, thinking 3 moves ahead. Someone has to. He glanced at her. Ready for what comes next? Absolutely, are you? Walker considered the question. The road ahead would be challenging. Davis would seek revenge. The technical hurdles remained substantial, but they had proven something important today. That experience still mattered. That human judgment remained irreplaceable. That some traditions deserve preservation. More ready than I've been in years, he answered truthfully. As they drove away from the Capitol, Walker looked back at the imposing dome. Politics and war, as Maxwell had noted, made uncomfortable bedfellows. Yet today, at least, the warriors had won a round against the politicians. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, the Stallion lived on, and with it, a legacy worth preserving. The journey back to Fort Hood carried a different energy than their flight to Washington. Despite Senator Davis's opposition, General Maxwell's intervention had secured the Stallion's future, at least temporarily. Yet Walker sensed the real battle was just beginning. Maxwell put his career on the line for us, Harrison remarked as their plane began its descent. We can't let him down. We won't, Walker replied with quiet confidence. The stallion will exceed even his expectations. When they arrived at the development center, they found the veteran crew and engineering team gathered in anticipation. News of the Washington showdown had already reached them through military channels. Rodriguez took the lead, addressing the assembled personnel. Thanks to General Maxwell's intervention, we have funding and authorization to continue, he announced to spontaneous applause. But now we have to prove we deserve it. The prototype must be combat ready in 3 weeks. Walker stepped forward. We've shown what happens when experience and innovation work together. Now we finish what we started, not just a better tank, but a new way of thinking about how we develop weapon systems. The team dispersed with renewed purpose. In the days that followed, the Stallion XP2 transformed from prototype to near production model. Systems were finalized, tested, refined. The veteran crew worked tirelessly alongside their engineering counterparts, each bringing complementary knowledge to the challenge. Walker found himself in the commander's station of the Stallion late one evening, running through operational checks. The familiar feel of the controls brought memories flooding back. Desert storm, the heat, the noise, the brotherhood of the tank crew. She feels right, doesn't she? Walker turned to find Vasquez watching him from the loader's position. Like she was always meant to be this way, Walker agreed, capable without being complicated. Vasquez nodded, understanding. Been thinking about Manny. He would have loved seeing his boy leading this project. He'd be proud, Walker replied, emotion unexpectedly tight in his chest. Rodriguez has his father's determination and integrity. And his stubbornness, Vasquez added with a smile. The kid doesn't quit, just like his old man. They sat in companionable silence. Two veterans remembering a fallen brother while helping to build a future he would never see. Such was the warrior's path, carrying forward the legacy of those lost along the way. You should talk to Eleanor, Vasquez said suddenly. Walker glanced sharply at him. What? Eleanor, Dr. Morgan. The woman you've been dancing around since this project began. Vasquez's expression was knowing. Life's too short for regrets, Thunder. We've both seen enough good men die to know that. Before Walker could respond, the hangar doors opened and Rodriguez entered with several engineers deep in technical conversation. The moment for personal reflection passed as duty reasserted itself. The following morning brought news that changed everything. Harrison called an emergency meeting of the core team. Satellite intelligence confirms Russian T-14 Armata tanks have been deployed to the Ukrainian border in combat configuration, he reported grimly. Pentagon analysts was give it 72 hours before potential incursion. The implications were immediately clear. If hostilities erupted, American military readiness would be under intense scrutiny. The Stallion program would be judged not just on technical merit, but on real-world relevance. What does this mean for our timeline? Rodriguez asked. It means we accelerate, Harrison replied. The Joint Chiefs want the Stallion evaluation completed before any potential conflict. They need to know if the platform is viable against next-generation Russian armor. Walker understood the stakes. How soon? 5 days. Harrison's expression revealed the impossibility of the demand. Final testing, comprehensive evaluation, and demonstration for the Pentagon brass. 5 days. Silence fell over the room as each person calculated what would be required. The schedule was already compressed. This new deadline seemed impossible. We'll make it happen, Walker stated finally. We've overcome every other obstacle. This is just one more. How? Thompson asked, ever the pragmatist. Even working around the clock, some systems need more time for proper integration testing. Then we prioritize, Walker decided. Core combat systems first, mobility, firepower, protection, communications. Everything else becomes secondary. Rodriguez nodded agreement. We focus on what makes a tank a fighting vehicle, not a technology showcase. Exactly, Walker confirmed. We deliver a Stallion that can fight and win, even if some advanced features remain in development. Harrison studied them, a mixture of pride and concern in his expression. I'll inform the Pentagon we accept the accelerated timeline. The next 5 days blurred into a continuous cycle of testing, refinement, and preparation. The veteran crew practically lived in and around the Stallion, applying decades of combat experience to ensure every system performed under stress. The engineering teams worked in shifts, solving problems as they emerged, implementing solutions immediately. Walker found himself increasingly impressed by Rodriguez's leadership. The young officer had grown during the project, balancing technical expertise with practical combat considerations. Manuel would indeed be proud of the man his son had become. On the fourth night, with less than 24 hours remaining before the Pentagon evaluation, a critical system failed during stress testing. The Stallion's power distribution network, overtaxed by continuous operation, suffered catastrophic burnout, damaging multiple electronic systems. The team gathered around the disabled tank, fatigue and frustration evident on every face. "How bad?" Walker asked the lead electrical engineer. "Primary and secondary power distribution modules fried, targeting computers damaged, communications array compromised." The engineer looked defeated. "Minimum 48 hours to replace and recalibrate if we had the parts." "Which we don't," Rodriguez added grimly. "The replacements are still in production, 3 days away at minimum." Walker surveyed the team. Exhaustion had taken its toll. Even the veteran crew showed the strain of the accelerated timeline. Yet beneath the fatigue, he saw determination. "Options?" he asked simply. Thompson stepped forward. "We could reconfigure the power system from the original Stallion design. It's less sophisticated but proven reliable. Would require bypassing some of the advanced electronics." "That would degrade targeting precision," an engineer objected. "But maintain basic fighting capability," Vasquez countered. "A tank that shoots with 90% accuracy is better than one that doesn't shoot at all." Walker nodded. "What else?" Eleanor, who had been examining the damaged components, looked up. "We could sacrifice some of the electronic warfare systems to preserve targeting and communications. Rewire the intact modules to prioritize essential functions." Rodriguez considered this, essentially creating a combat essential configuration, stripped down but functional. "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. "The Stallion would lose some capabilities but maintain core combat functionality." Walker made his decision. "Do it. Thompson, lead the power system reconfiguration. Eleanor, prioritize the remaining electronic components. Rodriguez, coordinate between teams." He checked his watch. "We have 18 hours to get this tank operational. I've seen crews perform miracles with less time and fewer resources." They worked through the night, the hangar illuminated by portable lights, the sound of tools and urgent voices creating a symphony of desperate determination. Walker moved between teams, offering encouragement, making decisions when conflicts arose, keeping everyone focused on the essential goal. By dawn, a transformed Stallion stood in the center of the hangar. Externally unchanged, internally it represented a hybrid of original design and emergency adaptation. Some advanced features had been sacrificed, but the core systems were operational. Walker climbed into the commander's station to perform preliminary checks. The displays lit up, systems reported ready. He activated the targeting system, watching as it came online with slightly reduced functionality but acceptable performance. "She'll fight," he declared to the exhausted team. "Not everything we wanted, but everything a tank needs to be." Rodriguez joined him in the turret. "The Pentagon delegation arrives in 6 hours. We should all get some rest." Walker nodded agreement. 4 hours sleep for everyone, then final preparations. As the team dispersed, Eleanor remained behind. She approached the tank, placing her hand on the hull. "This wasn't how we imagined the culmination of the project." "Few battles end as planned," Walker replied, climbing down from the turret. "The measure of success isn't perfection, but adaptation to changing circumstances." Eleanor studied him. "Philosophy from Thomas Walker? You have changed." He smiled slightly. "Not philosophy, experience, something you can't program into an autonomous vehicle." They stood together in the early morning light, surrounded by the evidence of their collective effort. Something had shifted between them during this project, a reconnection not based on rekindled romance, but on shared purpose and mutual respect. "Whatever happens today," Eleanor said softly, "this was worth doing." Walker nodded. "Worth doing right." 4 hours later, the team reassembled, remarkably refreshed considering the circumstances. Final checks were completed, systems verified, documentation prepared. The Stallion XP2 gleamed under the hangar lights, battle-ready despite the compromises forced by circumstance. The Pentagon delegation arrived precisely on schedule. General Maxwell led the group, accompanied by senior officers from each service branch and technical specialists. Harrison greeted them formally before turning the briefing over to Rodriguez. The presentation was concise and honest. Rodriguez explained both the Stallion's capabilities and the emergency modifications necessitated by the power system failure. Rather than attempting to disguise the compromises, He highlighted how the team had prioritized combat effectiveness over technical sophistication. The stallion before you represents the essential fighting vehicle, Rodriguez concluded. While some advanced features have been temporarily sacrificed, all systems critical to battlefield survival and mission accomplishment are fully operational. General Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. Adaptability under pressure, the true test of any weapon system. He turned to Walker. Colonel, you've commanded tanks in combat. In your professional assessment, is this vehicle combat ready? Walker met his gaze directly. Yes, General. The Stallion XP2 can fight and win against any opposing armor currently deployed worldwide. More importantly, it can survive the unexpected challenges of actual combat, where plans rarely survive first contact with the enemy. Maxwell considered this. Demonstrate. What followed was the most comprehensive evaluation Walker had ever witnessed. The Stallion was subjected to extreme conditions, electronic countermeasures, simulated battle damage, and operational stress beyond normal parameters. Through it all, the tank performed reliably, if not perfectly. When a critical electronic system failed during electronic warfare testing, the mechanical backup engaged seamlessly, allowing continued operation. When communications were jammed, the Stallion maintained internal functionality and limited external coordination through alternate channels. When the power system was deliberately degraded to 50% capacity, essential weapons and mobility remained operational. Throughout the testing, Walker observed Maxwell's reactions. The general's expression revealed nothing, yet his attention never wavered. He understood what they were witnessing, not a perfect weapon, but a resilient one. A tank that degraded gracefully under stress rather than catastrophically failing. As the evaluation concluded, the Stallion returned to the hangar, scorched from simulated near misses, dust-covered from off-road trials, but fundamentally intact and operational. The crew emerged tired but triumphant. They had pushed the tank to its limits and beyond, and it had survived. Maxwell approached Walker as the technical specialist gathered data from the final tests. Impressive performance under the circumstances, Colonel. Thank you, General. The credit belongs to the entire team, veterans and engineers working together to solve problems neither could handle alone. Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. A lesson there for the Pentagon as a whole, perhaps. He glanced toward where Davis stood with the Centaur Defense Systems representatives who had observed the demonstration. Some believe technology alone is the answer. Others cling too tightly to tradition. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. Before Walker could respond, Maxwell continued. The Joint Chiefs will receive my recommendation this evening. Given the current strategic situation, expect deployment orders for the first Stallion units within 30 days. Walker's surprise must have shown on his face. Did you think this was merely an evaluation, Colonel? Maxwell allowed himself a small smile. The world doesn't stop for weapons development. Sometimes circumstances force our hand. With that cryptic statement, Maxwell rejoined the delegation. Minutes later, they departed, leaving the team to wonder about their fate. Harrison gathered them after the Pentagon group had gone. No official decision yet, but Maxwell's comment about deployment orders speaks volumes. So we succeeded? Thompson asked cautiously. We demonstrated a fighting vehicle that meets critical combat requirements despite significant challenges, Harrison replied. In military procurement terms, that's as close to success as it gets. Walker remained thoughtful. Maxwell's words suggested something beyond normal evaluation protocols. The mention of deployment orders indicated urgency beyond typical procurement timelines. What happens now? Rodriguez asked. We prepare for production implementation, Harrison answered, and we restore the Stallion to full specification, incorporating what we've learned from the emergency modifications. As the team dispersed to begin this new phase, Walker found himself alongside Eleanor. You're concerned about something, she observed. Maxwell's comments about deployment, the urgency. Walker chose his words carefully. This feels like preparation for something specific, not general readiness. Eleanor studied him. You think conflict is imminent. I think Maxwell knows something we don't. Something that makes the Stallion's combat readiness an immediate priority rather than a long-term consideration. Before they could discuss this further, Harrison approached. Thunder, a moment. Walker excused himself, following Harrison to a private office. The general's expression confirmed his suspicions. What didn't Maxwell say publicly? Walker asked directly. Harrison closed the door. Russian forces have begun limited incursions in eastern Ukraine. Not full invasion yet, but probing actions. Their new T-14s are involved. Testing defenses and international response, Walker concluded. Exactly. The Pentagon needs to know if the Stallion can counter the T-14 effectively. Today's evaluation wasn't just about program continuation. It was about immediate strategic planning. The implications were sobering. If tensions escalated, American forces might find themselves facing Russian armor directly or through proxy forces. The Stallion's capabilities could determine the outcome of such encounters. How soon until production models? First 10 units expedited, 90 days. Harrison's expression was grim. May not be soon enough if things deteriorate rapidly. Walker absorbed this. The prototype? Combat capable as demonstrated today. If necessary, it could deploy with an experienced crew. Harrison studied Walker carefully. Your crew, potentially. The possibility hung in the air between them. Walker hadn't commanded a tank in combat for years, yet the muscle memory remained. The instincts honed by countless hours in the commander's station. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Walker replied. But if it does, we'll be ready. Harrison nodded, satisfied. Get some rest, Thunder. You've earned it. But rest proved elusive. Walker found himself returning to the hangar where the Stallion stood, battle-scarred but unbowed by the day's testing. In the quiet emptiness, he climbed aboard, settling into the commander's station. The familiar surroundings brought both comfort and disquiet. He hadn't sought a return to active service, had believed that chapter of his life concluded. Yet here he sat, contemplating the possibility of combat once more, not from ambition or duty, but from the simple reality that he knew this machine better than anyone. If American lives depended on the Stallion's performance, how could he remain on the sidelines? Somehow I knew I'd find you here. Walker looked up to find Eleanor approaching the tank. She climbed up, taking the gunner's position beside him. Old habits, he offered by way of explanation. Preparing, she corrected gently. You've sensed what's coming. Walker nodded, unsurprised by her perception. Harrison confirmed it. Russian incursions have already begun. Limited for now, but escalation seems likely. And the Stallion might see combat sooner than anyone anticipated, with an experienced crew. My crew, potentially. Walker met her gaze. I haven't commanded in combat since Iraq. Thought those days were behind me. Eleanor studied him thoughtfully. Are you afraid? The directness of the question deserved an honest answer. Not of combat, of failing those who would depend on me. It's been a long time, Eleanor. Some things you don't forget, she replied, like how to lead, how to make decisions under pressure, how to bring your people home. Walker appreciated her confidence, even if he didn't entirely share it. If it comes to deployment, what will you do? Continue my work here. The armor system still needs refinement. She hesitated. And worry about you, I suppose. Some habits persist despite our best efforts. The admission hung between them, neither uncomfortable nor unwelcome. A simple acknowledgement of connection reestablished through shared purpose and mutual respect. If I deploy, Walker said carefully, I'd like to know there's something to come back to, something beyond duty. Eleanor held his gaze. There would be, there is. No declarations of love or promises of forever. They were too mature, had experienced too much loss for such absolutes. Just the recognition of possibility. Of doors once closed, now cautiously reopened. Then I better make sure I come back, Walker said simply. Eleanor smiled. I expect nothing less, Colonel. The moment was interrupted by Rodriguez entering the hangar. He approached the tank, noting their positions without comment. General Harrison is looking for both of you, he announced. Urgent development. They found Harrison in the communications center, reviewing satellite imagery with several intelligence officers. His expression was grave. Russian incursions have intensified, he reported without preamble. T-14s have engaged Ukrainian forces near Kharkiv. Early reports indicate significant Ukrainian armor losses. Walker studied the tactical displays. The T-14's performance? Impressive. Superior range, fire control, and survivability compared to Ukraine's Soviet-era tanks. Harrison pointed to the specific engagement zones. They're operating with drone support and electronic warfare units, creating a multi-domain threat environment. Exactly the scenario the Stallion was designed to counter, Rodriguez observed. Harrison nodded. Which is why I've received new orders from the Pentagon. The Stallion XP2 prototype is to be prepared for potential deployment to NATO's eastern flank for operational evaluation under near-combat conditions. The directive landed heavily, not direct combat, but close enough to gather real-world data against the Russian threat. Timeline. It was shown for me, Walker asked. 72 hours to full combat readiness, then airlift to Germany for forward staging. Harrison met Walker's gaze directly. They've requested you to command, Thunder, with your original crew if possible. Despite anticipating this possibility, the reality still gave Walker pause. After years of retirement, he was being asked to return to the arena. Not for training or evaluation, but for the deadliest game of all. Vasquez and Wilson will agree immediately, Thompson noted. I'll need to arrange emergency leave from the hospital, but my colleagues will understand. You're certain? Walker asked his old driver. Thompson smiled slightly. Some calls you don't refuse. The band is getting back together for one last tour. The gallows humor broke the tension momentarily. These men had faced death together before. The prospect, while sobering, was not unfamiliar. Rodriguez should join us, Walker decided. His engineering expertise will be invaluable if we encounter problems in the field. Harrison nodded agreement. I'll arrange the necessary clearances and orders. And Eleanor's armor modifications should be completed before departure, Walker continued. If we're evaluating against the T-14, we need every advantage. Already prioritized, Eleanor confirmed. The enhanced reactive elements will be installed tomorrow. The machinery of military deployment began moving with practiced efficiency. Within hours, orders were cut, arrangements made, schedules established. The Stallion XP-2, still bearing the scars of evaluation testing, was moved to a specialized work bay for combat preparation. Walker found himself in a familiar routine of pre-deployment checks and preparations, equipment verification, tactical briefings, intelligence assessments. The rhythms of preparing for combat returned with unsettling ease, as though the intervening years of civilian life had been merely an interlude rather than a new chapter. The veteran crew assembled with similar readiness, each man falling into established patterns. Vasquez inspected every aspect of the weapon systems with methodical precision. Thompson reviewed terrain data and mobility considerations for the potential operational area. Wilson prepared ammunition loadouts optimized for engagement with heavy armor. Rodriguez approached the process with professional curiosity, absorbing the pre-combat rituals of experienced warriors while contributing his technical expertise to system optimization. On the second day of preparation, Walker found a moment alone with Harrison. Frank, what aren't you telling us about this deployment? Harrison hesitated, then decided on honesty. The situation is deteriorating faster than publicly acknowledged. Intelligence suggests Russian forces may attempt a rapid thrust westward if initial operations succeed. NATO is positioning assets to deter such a move. And the Stallion is part of that deterrence. Potentially, its presence demonstrates American commitment to countering Russia's armored advantage. Harrison's expression was grave. But there's more. Senator Davis has continued his campaign against the program despite Maxwell's intervention. He's arguing that autonomous systems could be deployed more quickly and with less risk. Walker understood the implications. So this isn't just operational evaluation. It's a political statement as well. Everything at this level is political, Thunder. You know that. Harrison sighed heavily. The Stallion's performance under near-combat conditions will either silence the critics or validate their concerns. No pressure, Walker remarked dryly. Harrison managed a small smile. When has pressure ever bothered you? When other people's lives depend on my decisions, Walker replied honestly. That's why you're the right commander for this mission, Harrison countered, because you understand the weight of command. As Harrison departed, Eleanor approached, carrying technical documentation. Final armor specifications for your review. Walker accepted the documents, but his mind remained on Harrison's revelations. This deployment is as much about politics as military necessity. Eleanor nodded understanding. I suspected as much. Davis wouldn't accept defeat easily. Placing the Stallion near potential combat is a significant risk for an unproven platform, Walker noted. If we fail, the entire program could be terminated. Then don't fail, Eleanor replied simply. Do what you've always done. Adapt. Overcome. Bring your people home. Her confidence steadied him. Not blind faith, but reasoned trust based on observed capability. Eleanor had always seen him clearly, both strengths and weaknesses. The armor modifications are impressive, Walker said, reviewing the specifications. Theoretical performance against the T-14's main gun? Sufficient to survive initial impact at standard engagement ranges, Eleanor answered professionally. Multiple hits to the same location would eventually penetrate, but the modular design allows for rapid field replacement of damaged sections. Walker nodded approval. Practical solutions to real-world problems, the hallmark of effective engineering. Something I relearned during this project, Eleanor admitted. Academic elegance means nothing if it fails under actual conditions. Their conversation was interrupted by Rodriguez, who approached with evident concern. Colonel, we've received new intelligence on the T-14's electronic warfare capabilities. They're more extensive than initially reported. The briefing that followed revealed sophisticated Russian countermeasures designed to disrupt targeting systems and communications. The Stallion's hybrid design provided some inherent resilience, but additional hardening would be required before deployment. Can we implement the necessary modifications in the remaining time? Walker asked. Yes, but at the cost of some sensor sensitivity, Rodriguez replied. We'll need to recalibrate in the field based on actual threat parameters. Do it, Walker decided. Better reduce sensitivity than complete vulnerability. As Rodriguez departed to implement the changes, Eleanor remained thoughtful. The Russians have clearly anticipated Western technological dependence. Their countermeasures target precisely the systems most modern tanks rely upon. While maintaining robust mechanical backups in their own designs, Walker noted, they've learned from their experiences in Ukraine and Syria. Electronic supremacy is temporary. Mechanical reliability endures. The very philosophy embodied in the Stallion, Eleanor observed. Perhaps we were more prescient than we realized. The final day of preparation brought increased urgency as reports from Ukraine confirmed the effectiveness of Russian armor operations. The T-14 had proven its capabilities against Ukrainian forces, demonstrating superior firepower, protection, and battlefield awareness. The Stallion crew completed final checks and rehearsals, loading essential supplies and spare parts for extended field operations. Walker reviewed contingency plans with Rodriguez, establishing decision protocols for various scenarios they might encounter. As evening fell, with a departure scheduled for pre-dawn, Walker found himself alone in the hangar with the Stallion. The tank stood fully prepared, its angular form exuding lethal purpose. Not beautiful in conventional terms, but possessing the severe aesthetic of a tool perfectly designed for its function. Quite a journey from that first day. Walker turned to find Eleanor approaching. From skepticism to deployment in a matter of weeks. Not the typical procurement timeline. Nothing about this project has been typical. Eleanor stopped beside him, studying the Stallion. Are you ready? As ready as possible under the circumstances, Walker replied honestly. The real test will come when we face actual conditions. Eleanor nodded, understanding. I've been authorized to accompany you to Germany, not forward deployment, but I'll be available for technical consultation at the NATO base. The news brought unexpected relief. Having Eleanor's expertise readily available would prove valuable if adaptation became necessary. If Walker were honest with himself, her presence would provide personal comfort as well. That's good news, he acknowledged. Your armor design may face its ultimate test sooner than anticipated. It will perform as designed, Eleanor stated with quiet confidence. Bring the data back so we can make it even better for production models. Just the data? Walker asked, allowing a rare moment of personal vulnerability. Eleanor met his gaze directly. No, bring yourself back too, Thomas. We have unfinished business, you and I. No dramatic declarations or emotional promises. They had moved beyond such things. Just the simple acknowledgement of connection and possibility, of a future worth returning for. Count on it, Walker replied. Chapter 8. The Final Test. Dawn painted the eastern sky as the massive C-17 Globemaster III thundered down the runway. The Stallion XP-2 secured in its cavernous cargo bay. Walker sat with his crew and Rodriguez, each man lost in private thoughts as they began the journey toward potential conflict. The deployment had been officially designated Operation Anvil Shield, a NATO readiness exercise providing cover for the Stallion's operational evaluation. While not expected to engage in direct combat, the tank would operate near enough to the conflict zone to encounter realistic threat environments. Thompson broke the contemplative silence. Third time we've flown to a potential war zone together. Let's hope the third time's the charm, Vasquez replied. Never thought I'd be back in uniform at my age, Wilson added, adjusting his temporarily reinstated sergeant's insignia. My students won't believe their football coach got recalled. They'll be proud, Walker assured him, as they should be. Rodriguez observed the veterans with respectful attention. Despite his technical expertise, he had never experienced the pre-deployment emotions these men navigated with practiced ease. The mixture of tension, focus, and gallows humor that characterized warriors preparing for potential combat. My father never talked much about this part, Rodriguez remarked quietly to Walker. The journey to the battlefield. Walker nodded understanding. Most don't. It's a liminal space, no longer in safety, not yet in danger. Each man handles it differently. How do you handle it, sir? Walker considered the question. I review what I know, accept what I don't, and focus on bringing everyone home regardless of what we encounter. Rodriguez absorbed this. My father said something similar once, that a tank commander's first duty wasn't to the mission, but to his crew. Manuel was right, Walker confirmed. Accomplish the mission, but never at the unnecessary expense of your people. That's the burden of command. The flight continued for hours, refueling over the Atlantic before continuing to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Upon landing, they were immediately escorted to a secure briefing facility where Eleanor and Harrison already waited with NATO command staff. The situation briefing revealed a rapidly evolving crisis. Russian forces had expanded their incursions, with armored columns now threatening multiple sectors of the front. Ukrainian defenses were holding in some areas but collapsing in others, particularly where the T-14 Armata tanks led the advance. NATO response forces are deploying to Poland and Romania, explained General Weber, the German officer commanding the multinational battle group. Your mission is to evaluate the Stallion's performance against observed Russian tactics and capabilities, particularly their electronic warfare and drone integration. How close to the actual conflict zone? Walker asked. You'll operate in eastern Poland, approximately 30 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, Weber replied. Close enough to encounter realistic electronic warfare conditions, far enough to avoid direct engagement unless the situation deteriorates significantly. The unspoken implication hung in the air. If Russian forces pushed westward into NATO territory, all deployed assets would become combat elements, regardless of their original designation. When do we move to the forward position? Walker inquired. Tomorrow at 0600, rail transport to the Polish border, then self-propelled to the designated operational area. Weber gestured to a tactical map displaying the evaluation zone. You'll conduct progressive testing, beginning with basic mobility and targeting and electronic warfare conditions, then advancing to more complex scenarios including potential drone threats. Walker studied the map, noting terrain features and potential engagement areas. The designated zone offered varied conditions for comprehensive evaluation, while maintaining sufficient distance from known Russian positions to prevent accidental escalation. Following the briefing, the crew inspected the Stallion after its air transport. Despite the careful loading and securing procedures, such journeys always risked minor damage or misalignment. Each system required verification before operational deployment. As evening approached, Walker found Eleanor reviewing technical data in the base's engineering facility. How does it look from your perspective? The armor performed exactly as designed during testing, she replied, but the real evaluation will come under actual electronic warfare conditions. The Russians have reportedly developed specific countermeasures targeting Western fire control systems. Our hybrid approach should provide some resilience, Walker noted. In theory, practice often reveals unexpected complications. Eleanor set aside her tablet. Thomas, I need to tell you something before you deploy forward. The seriousness of her tone caught his attention. What is it? Senator Davis hasn't given up. He's scheduled another Armed Services Committee hearing for next week, regardless of the operational evaluation results. His staff has been gathering testimony from technical experts questioning the Stallion's fundamental design philosophy. Walker absorbed this. Politics continuing despite potential conflict. Some things never change. This goes beyond normal political maneuvering, Eleanor emphasized. Davis appears determined to terminate the Stallion program regardless of performance or its strategic necessity. His connections to Centaur defense systems run deeper than initially reported. Financial interest? Eleanor nodded. Substantial ones, according to Harrison's sources. The Autonomous Combat Vehicle program represents billions in potential contracts. Then our evaluation carries even more weight, Walker concluded. Actual field performance against real threats may be the only evidence powerful enough to override political determination. Be careful, Thomas, Eleanor cautioned. Davis has powerful allies. If the Stallion performs too well, they might prefer it never return for production implementation. The implication was sobering. Politics and warfare made dangerous bedfellows indeed. We'll complete the evaluation and bring the data back, Walker stated firmly. What happens afterward is beyond our control. Eleanor studied him with evident concern. Just bring yourselves back too. The Stallion can be rebuilt if necessary. Its crew cannot. Walker recognized the sentiment beneath the practical statement. We will, that's a promise. Morning brought final preparations for forward deployment. The stallion was loaded onto a specialized rail car, while the crew gathered essential supplies and communications equipment. By 0630, they were underway, the massive transport train rumbling eastward toward the Polish border. Rodriguez joined Walker in the transport compartment, reviewing electronic warfare countermeasures. Our latest intelligence suggests the Russians are using a layered approach. Long-range broadband jamming to disrupt communications, targeted narrowband interference for precision targeting systems. How vulnerable is the Stallion? Walker asked directly. Less than most modern tanks due to our hybrid approach, Rodriguez replied. The manual backups provide resilience, though at reduced efficiency. The greatest vulnerability remains the communication suite, particularly for longer-range coordination. Walker nodded understanding. We'll establish fallback protocols, visual signals, predetermined maneuvers, designated rally points. Old school, Rodriguez observed. Tried and tested, Walker corrected. Sometimes the oldest solutions remain effective precisely because they're simple and reliable. The journey continued throughout the day, the landscape gradually transforming from Germany's ordered countryside to Poland's eastern territories. Evidence of military mobilization became increasingly apparent. Convoys on highways, aircraft patrolling overhead, field hospitals being established. They reached the designated offloading point by late afternoon. The Stallion was transferred from rail to its own tracks, systems activated, and final checks completed. By evening, they had established position at the forward operations base, a hastily assembled compound of temporary structures and defensive positions. The NATO command briefing confirmed deteriorating conditions along the Ukrainian border. Russian electronic warfare activities had intensified, affecting systems up to 50 kilometers inside NATO territory. Drone incursions, while officially denied by Moscow, occurred with increasing frequency. Your evaluation will proceed under these actual conditions, the Polish commander explained. Beginning tomorrow with basic mobility and targeting exercises, then advancing to more complex scenarios as conditions permit. Walker reviewed the planned testing sequence with his crew, establishing clear objectives and safety parameters. While technically an evaluation rather than combat deployment, the proximity to active conflict required comprehensive contingency planning. Remember, Walker emphasized, we're here to evaluate the Stallion's performance, not engage Russian forces. If the situation changes, our priority becomes extraction with the vehicle and data intact. The crew nodded understanding, professionals focused on their mission despite the underlying tensions. Dawn revealed a landscape transformed by military necessity. The once peaceful Polish countryside now bristled with defensive positions, mobile air defense systems, and mechanized infantry units. Above, NATO aircraft maintained constant patrols, monitoring for any incursion across the border. The Stallion moved out at 0700, beginning the first phase of evaluation. Walker commanded from his familiar position, Vasquez at the gunner's station, Thompson driving, and Wilson managing the loading systems. Rodriguez monitored the electronic systems, documenting performance and implementing adjustments as required. Initial mobility testing proved the Stallion's mechanical systems unaffected by the electronic warfare environment. The hybrid drivetrain performed flawlessly across varied terrain, from forested areas to open fields and muddy lowlands. Fuel efficiency remained within expected parameters despite challenging conditions. Phase 1 complete, Walker reported to the NATO evaluation team. Moving to targeting evaluation in Sector Bravo. The second phase would test the Stallion's ability to acquire and track targets while subjected to electronic countermeasures. As they approached the designated area, Rodriguez noted increasing interference on monitoring systems. Electronic warfare intensity increasing, he reported. Targeting assistance degrading to approximately 70% efficiency. Switching to hybrid mode, Vasquez responded, activating the manual backup systems while maintaining electronic support where available. Walker observed the transition, noting the seamless integration between digital and analog systems. The design philosophy they had fought for, maintaining essential capabilities regardless of electronic environment, was proving its worth under actual conditions. The targeting test proceeded systematically, engaging simulated targets at various ranges under progressively intense electronic warfare conditions. The Stallion's performance degraded gracefully rather than catastrophically, maintaining acceptable accuracy even when digital systems were significantly compromised. This is exactly what we designed for, Rodriguez noted with professional satisfaction. Performance adaptation rather than binary functionality. Walker nodded agreement. Document everything. This is the evidence we need to validate our approach. As they completed the second phase and prepared to return to base for system recalibration, Thompson reported unusual movement on their flank. Unidentified vehicle approaching from southeast, approximately 3 kilometers. Walker immediately directed attention to the potential contact. Vasquez, identify. The gunner swung the main optics toward the reported position. Unmanned ground vehicle, armed, not matching any NATO profile in the recognition database. Rodriguez verified on his systems. Configuration suggests Russian origin, likely Iran 9 or derivative. Maintain observation. Do not target unless directly threatened, Walker ordered. Command, Stallion Actual. We have unidentified UGV at grid coordinates Echo 59er. Requesting verification of friendly forces in our operational area. The response came back immediately. Stallion Actual Command, no friendly unmanned assets operating in your vicinity. Consider the contact hostile, but do not engage unless directly threatened. Monitoring drone deploying to your position. The situation had suddenly evolved beyond evaluation parameters. Either a Russian unmanned combat vehicle had crossed into NATO territory, or Russian-supplied forces were operating inside Poland. Both possibilities represented significant escalation. All stations maintain combat alertness, Walker directed. Thompson, position for maximum hull-down coverage. Vasquez, maintain visual tracking but keep the main gun lowered to avoid appearing threatening. The crew responded with practiced efficiency, the Stallion moving to a defensive position, utilizing natural terrain for protection while maintaining observation capabilities. UGV continuing approach, Vasquez reported. Now 2 kilometers in closing. It appears to be conducting some form of reconnaissance pattern. Electronic signature analysis suggests active sensor emissions, Rodriguez added. It's scanning us, likely mapping our systems. Walker considered the implications. This was not accidental. The unmanned vehicle was deliberately probing NATO defensive capabilities, specifically targeting the Stallion for intelligence gathering. Command Stallion Actual. The UGV appears to be conducting targeted reconnaissance of our position and systems. Request guidance. Stallion Actual, maintain position. Air assets 2 minutes out. Do not engage unless the UGV demonstrates clear hostile intent. Walker acknowledged. Though his instincts suggested more proactive measures might be prudent. The unmanned vehicle's deliberate focus on the Stallion indicated specific interest in the new tank, potentially to gather intelligence for countermeasure development. 1.5 kilometers in holding position, Vasquez updated. It's deploying some kind of sensor array. Electronic probing intensifying, Rodriguez confirmed. They're attempting to map our system's architecture and vulnerabilities. Walker made his decision. Thompson repositioned to bearing 180, 300 meters. Let's see if it follows our movement. The Stallion backed carefully from its position, maintaining defensive orientation while creating distance from the unmanned vehicle. The UGV immediately adjusted its position, maintaining observation capability. Definite interest in our platform specifically, Walker noted. Command, the UGV is tracking our movements with evident focus on the Stallion. We assess this as deliberate intelligence gathering on our capabilities. Understood, Stallion Actual. NATO Quick Reaction Force deploying to your position. ETA 7 minutes. Continue evasive maneuvering without direct engagement. The situation balanced on a knife edge. While not directly hostile, the unmanned vehicle's actions represented a clear violation of NATO airspace and deliberate intelligence operation against a strategic asset. New contact, Vasquez reported suddenly. Aerial drone approaching from the east. High speed, low altitude. Electronic warfare intensity spiking, Rodriguez added urgently. Communications jamming, attempting to isolate our position. The coordinated nature of these actions eliminated any doubt about their purpose. This was a deliberate operation to assess the Stallion's capabilities under pressure, potentially to identify vulnerabilities for future exploitation. Command, Stallion Actual, Walker transmitted, fighting through the increasing electronic interference. We are experiencing coordinated electronic warfare and surveillance operations. Request permission to employ active countermeasures. The response came broken and distorted. Stallion, countermeasures authorized, preserve, integrity. We're losing communications, Rodriguez confirmed. Targeted jamming specifically against our frequency band. Walker made his assessment. This had evolved beyond evaluation into an active intelligence operation against a strategic asset. While still not representing direct combat, it required appropriate countermeasures to protect classified capabilities. Deploy electronic countermeasures, focus disruption, Walker ordered. Thompson, continue evasive maneuvering. Vasquez, maintain targeting solution but do not engage. Rodriguez activated the Stallion's electronic warfare suite, directing focused jamming against the unmanned systems while preserving their own essential communications. The effect was immediate. The aerial drone's flight became erratic, its sensors evidently compromised. Ground UGV retreating, Vasquez reported. Aerial drone attempting to maintain position, but showing signs of control difficulty. The NATO Quick Reaction Force arrived minutes later, armored vehicles establishing a defensive perimeter around the Stallion while air defense systems tracked the retreating drone until it crossed back into Ukrainian airspace. When communications were restored, Walker provided a detailed report of the encounter. The NATO command assessment confirmed his suspicions, a deliberate Russian intelligence operation to gather data on the Stallion's capabilities, particularly its resistance to electronic warfare measures. This validates the immediate strategic importance of your evaluation mission, the Polish commander noted. Russian forces clearly consider the Stallion a significant enough threat to risk provocation. Walker recognized these implications. The encounter, while falling short of direct combat, had provided valuable data under actual operational conditions. The Stallion had performed precisely as designed, maintaining essential capabilities despite coordinated electronic attack. We'll adjust tomorrow's evaluation parameters based on what we've learned, Walker decided. Focus on enhanced electronic countermeasures in coordination with supporting units. That evening, he transmitted a secure report to Harrison and Eleanor, detailing the encounter and the Stallion's performance. Their response came within hours, authorizing additional electronic warfare hardening measures based on the observed Russian capabilities. The encounter confirms our design philosophy, Eleanor noted in her response. Hybrid systems providing resilience where purely digital approaches would have failed completely. The following day brought intensified evaluation under conditions now informed by actual Russian tactics. The Stallion performed increasingly complex maneuvers while subjected to simulated electronic warfare based on the previous day's encounter. By day's end, they had completed the core evaluation objectives, gathering comprehensive performance data across all critical systems. The results validated the Stallion's fundamental design approach: graceful degradation rather than catastrophic failure, maintained combat effectiveness even in the most challenging electronic environments. As they prepared for extraction back to the main NATO base, Harrison contacted them with urgent news. The Armed Services Committee hearing has been moved up again. Senator Davis is attempting to force a vote before your evaluation results can be formally presented. The political battle continued unabated despite the operational validation. Walker recognized the strategy: procedural maneuvering to circumvent evidence that might contradict predetermined conclusions. We'll complete documentation en route, Walker assured him. The data speaks for itself. It won't matter if the committee votes before receiving it, Harrison replied grimly. Davis has the votes unless something changes the political calculus. The Stallion began its journey back to the main NATO base, performance validated under near-combat conditions, but its future still uncertain. The crew worked throughout the return trip, organizing evaluation data and preparing formal reports documenting the tank's performance. Upon arrival at Ramstein, they found Eleanor waiting, her expression revealing mixed emotions. The committee votes tomorrow morning. General Maxwell is attempting to delay proceedings, but Davis has significant procedural advantages as chairman. Walker absorbed this. Then we provide what evidence we can in the time available and trust the system to recognize the Stallion's value. The system is compromised by financial interests in political ambitions, Eleanor countered. Davis has already drafted the termination recommendation regardless of your evaluation results. The frustration was evident among all who had contributed to the project. Months of dedicated work, a revolutionary approach to armored warfare, proven effective under actual conditions, all potentially negated by political maneuvering and corporate influence. There's one more option, Harrison suggested, joining them after completing his own briefing with NATO Command. General Maxwell has authorized an emergency demonstration for the Joint Chiefs, conducted via secure video link from here. While it can't directly override the committee, a unanimous recommendation from the Joint Chiefs would create significant political pressure. When? Walker asked. 3 hours from now. Ur 200 local time, 2000 in Washington. Harrison's expression was grim but determined. One final chance to demonstrate the stallion's value to those who truly understand its strategic importance. The next 3 hours passed in focused preparation. The stallion was positioned in the demonstration area, systems verified, presentation materials organized. The crew, despite exhaustion from operational deployment, remained professional and committed. At precisely 0200, the secure video link activated. The Joint Chiefs appeared on the main display, General Maxwell at the center, flanked by his counterparts from each service branch. Behind them, several senior Pentagon officials observed silently. Colonel Walker, proceed with your report, Maxwell directed without preamble. Walker presented the operational evaluation results with military precision, focusing on the stallion's performance under actual electronic warfare conditions and the coordinated Russian intelligence operation targeting the tank specifically. The Russian response confirms what we've maintained throughout development, Walker emphasized. The stallion represents a strategic capability that directly counters our adversaries' most advanced systems. Its hybrid design philosophy proved essential to maintaining combat effectiveness in the electromagnetic battle space we encountered. Rodriguez followed with technical analysis, supported by Eleanor's assessment of the armor system's performance. Harrison concluded with strategic implications, emphasizing the immediate relevance to evolving threats in Eastern Europe and beyond. Throughout the presentation, the Joint Chiefs remained attentive but expressionless, asking occasional clarifying questions but revealing nothing of their assessment. As the briefing concluded, Maxwell spoke for the group. Thank you for your comprehensive report, particularly under the compressed timeline. The Joint Chiefs will deliver our recommendation to the Secretary of Defense immediately. He paused, then added with slight emphasis, your operational deployment has provided extremely valuable data that will inform strategic decisions regardless of procurement outcomes. The transmission ended, leaving the team uncertain of the impact. Had they been persuasive enough? Would military expertise prevail over political calculation? Get some rest, Harrison advised. The committee votes in 6 hours. We've done all we can. Walker found himself unable to sleep despite exhaustion. He walked the quiet base, eventually finding himself at the hangar where the stallion stood, battle-worn but undefeated. The tank represented more than metal and technology. It embodied a philosophy about the relationship between humans and machines, experience and innovation, tradition and progress. Can't sleep either? Eleanor approached from the hangar entrance, similarly restless despite the late hour. Too much at stake, Walker acknowledged. Not just for the program, but for the concept it represents. Eleanor nodded understanding. The idea that human judgment remains irreplaceable, even as technology advances. That some traditions endure because they're fundamentally sound, not merely because of institutional inertia. Exactly. Walker studied the stallion's angular profile. This tank isn't perfect. It represents compromises and adaptations, but it works where it matters most, keeping its crew alive while accomplishing the mission. Like all good engineering, Eleanor observed, perfection is less valuable than practical effectiveness under actual conditions. They stood together in companionable silence, two professionals who had found renewed connection through shared purpose and mutual respect. Whatever tomorrow brought, they had created something worthwhile together. Dawn approached, bringing no further word from Washington. The committee would convene at 1000 Eastern Time, 1600 local. As the hour neared, the core team gathered in the command center, where a secure feed would transmit the proceedings. Senator Davis called the session to order precisely on schedule, his expression revealing nothing of the behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Today, this committee votes on Recommendation SR 147 regarding the Stallion Tank Modernization Program. Before proceeding to the vote, I've been informed that the Secretary of Defense wishes to address the committee. This was unexpected. The Secretary appeared on the main screen, his presence signaling the extraordinary importance attached to the proceeding. Thank you, Senator Davis. I'll be brief. Based on operational data received overnight from NATO's eastern flank and the unanimous recommendation of the Joint Chiefs, I am designating the Stallion XP2 program as essential to national security under Executive Order 3806. Davis appeared momentarily stunned. Mr. Secretary, this committee has oversight responsibility for defense procurement decisions. Indeed it does, Senator, and your committee's input remains valuable. However, the executive order specifically authorizes expedited procurement of systems deemed critical to addressing emerging threats to national security. The secretary's tone remained professional but firm. The Stallion has demonstrated unique capabilities against Russian electronic warfare systems currently employed in Eastern Europe. These capabilities are deemed essential to maintaining NATO's defensive posture. The political maneuver was masterful, acknowledging congressional authority while simultaneously removing the immediate decision from congressional control. Davis could continue his opposition, but the program would proceed regardless, protected by executive authority. The committee will still vote on its recommendation, Davis insisted, though his tone suggested he recognized the changed reality. Of course, Senator, and that recommendation will inform ongoing program oversight. The secretary nodded respectfully before disconnecting. The committee proceeded with its vote, still splitting 4-3 against the Stallion. But the vote was now symbolic rather than decisive. The program would continue, production would commence, and the tank walkers team had created would soon join the American arsenal. Harrison turned to the assembled team as the transmission ended. Congratulations, the Stallion lives on. The celebration was subdued, professional satisfaction rather than exuberant joy. They had accomplished their mission against significant obstacles, proving both the tank's capabilities and the enduring value of their design philosophy. In the days that followed, the team prepared for return to Fort Hood, where they would oversee the transition to production implementation. The Stallion XP2 prototype would remain briefly in Europe for additional NATO familiarization before joining them. On their final evening at Ramstein, Walker found Eleanor on the observation deck overlooking the flight line. Aircraft arrived and departed continuously, evidence of the ongoing military response to Eastern tensions. What happens now, she asked as he joined her. Production implementation, training programs, the 1,000 details of introducing a new weapon system. Walker leaned against the railing beside her. The beginning rather than the end. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. And for us, what happens now? The question addressed the unfinished personal business between them. The connection reestablished through shared purpose, the possibility of something beyond professional collaboration. That depends, Walker replied carefully. My retirement ends officially next month. I could return to the ranch, or, Eleanor prompted when he hesitated. Or I could accept Harrison's offer to oversee the Stallion training program. 3 years based at Fort Hood. Walker met her gaze directly. Not far from where you'll be continuing armor development. The implication hung between them, neither pushing for definitive commitments, but acknowledging possibilities. 3 years would provide adequate time, Eleanor observed with a small smile, to determine if certain experimental combinations prove viable long-term. Walker smiled in return, appreciating her scientific framing of personal matters. Thorough evaluation does require appropriate time parameters. And controlled testing under various conditions, Eleanor added, her eyes reflecting warmth beneath the professional veneer. Then it settled, a 3-year evaluation phase. Walker extended his hand formally, though his expression conveyed deeper meaning, with protocols to be determined as we proceed. Eleanor accepted his hand, the contact lingering. I look forward to the research process, Colonel Walker. As they stood together watching aircraft traverse the evening sky, Walker reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From reluctant consultant to tank commander once more. From isolated retirement to renewed purpose. From past regrets to future possibilities. The Stallion had proven itself under fire, vindicating their design philosophy and securing its place in America's defense strategy. More importantly, the project had demonstrated that experience and innovation, tradition and progress, could work together rather than in opposition. Some legacies deserved preservation. Some traditions endured because they embodied essential truths. And sometimes the most valuable weapon in humanity's arsenal remained the judgment, courage, and adaptability of the warrior behind the machine. Thomas Thunder Walker had relearned this truth, had helped others recognize it, and in doing so had found his way forward at last. Not a conclusion, but a continuation. The legacy of steel endured.